This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the broadcasting system. This is only a test. The broadcasters of your area have developed this system to keep you informed. This is only a test.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the SoulSplit stream. We're gonna be talking about all kinds of fun stuff today. Um, Getting a little bit later start than we initially planned on, and that is all my fault. I'll take all the credit for that. Um, how's it going? How are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Um, Nothing too interesting on my end, I don't think.
Yeah, cool.
I I thought I'd surprise you with with a bet actually, because
Uh-oh.
who doesn't like having gambling surprised upon them? Um, which was, what would it take for this? How successful or unsuccessful would this game have to be for you to get the dripping eye as a tattoo on your body?
Man, all it would take is a booked tattoo appointment and money to cover the tattoo and tip the artist, and I'm there. It not
So like
very high.
$100 of success is enough.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
exactly.
mon the cap. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm set. All I got to do is make that appointment. So hey, if anyone wants those donation links, let me know. I'm there. Um
I
Very low
what
bar.
I'd like yeah, I was gonna say this bar is way lower than I came into this,
No,
anticipating.
I love tattoos. I love getting tattooed. I want so many more of them. And it's just like anything else, just a matter of time and money and all of those things in life. So yeah, the bar is always very low for that.
My suggestion was going to be, why don't, like, say it's $100 to get that tattoo, which just sounds about right to me. Why don't we, uh, get it if the game makes that much profit?
Yeah, sounds good to
Like
me.
that can be, you can spend the first paycheck on
Yeah, exactly.
the
Heck
dripping
yeah,
eye tattoo. Yeah.
I like it. I'm I'm already there. um, yeah, I'm excited for that
Really good.
already. Cool. Yeah, let's this look at some actually interesting stuff other than our faces. Um, so I know when we left off last week, um, we were talking about a million different things, and a lot has been kind of added or talked about or discussed between us since then. Either during like the solo art streams that I've been doing, or uh, just off air, behind the scenes stuff that we've been talking about. Um,
Yeah.
where are you at with anything right now? How are you feeling? Is there something specific that you've been working on, or uh we're kind of working
Yeah,
through at
I
the moment?
I haven't made a ton of progress since last time. I can't remember
Cool.
which of this is new and which of this isn't new. My plan for tonight, for me is for tonight. My plan for this stream was to start integrating some of the assets that you've been working on. So
Cool. Okay.
swap out the stuff on the world map, and then maybe start working towards the the other layout, a better layout than we currently have
Yeah.
for like combats.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
I
I think
think
that would be
that,
time well spent at this point.
yeah, definitely. I know that, like, the dungeon kind of layouts that I kind of threw together real quick at the end of stream yesterday. Um, very similar, to me, or for me at least, of those first two card things. The card shapes and designs, like the red border and all that stuff, of here's
Yeah,
something just to get things up and running and something to look at, from nothing.
yeah,
And I kept saying on stream yesterday, like, my thoughts behind like the first initial passes of anything like that is, let's get all of our bad ideas out of the way first. Just let's put anything down and figure out what doesn't work, so then we can, kind of only go up from there. um so that's where I'm at with that. And then similarly with why I've kind of been uh putting off or holding back on, actually diving in and tackling the um any kind of map design, whether it's for the town area or it's the dungeon area, uh from up literally from the beginning up to this point, has been the conversation we had yesterday about just like orientation of this, like what is the
yeah,
aspect ratio and anything like that, because I was hesitant to start anything with like a vertical kind of layout in mind, without, because I wouldn't want to, design something like this in like 16 by 9, like kind of standard like HD resolution. um I didn't want to start with something like this and then, like, okay, it gets ported to mobile, and then, all we might see is, uh like a portion of this. So, I didn't want to like do this like big design and then it's like, oh yeah, this is the only thing that we actually do see is like this area here. Um
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for us the struggle is that we started, we kind of connected and got excited over our joint love for all games, but
yeah,
specifically
exactly.
we were like, here's some cool mobile games that we like. Um, and yet I have a pretty strong inkling that like sometimes good PC games get ported to mobile, but almost never
Yeah.
do good mobile games get ported to PC in a way that makes them worth playing.
Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that.
s- s- so we, yeah, and even if that's not necessarily true, it feels like that's what the consensus is. And so, so yeah, you're right. We've been in this like, do we go this vertical horizontal struggle until
Yeah.
really this week, really the last couple of days.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's I feel good about where we ended with that. And again, if for some reason like it if we try it, or if when we port it and we maintain like a horizontal um layout, if it doesn't work on mobile for some reason, or if we have issues, then obviously we can address it when we come to that. But um from kind of like my perspective of like, and like something we've both talked about being pretty interested in, is creating as much of this immersive feel as we can, to where
Yeah.
I didn't want to again like limit myself to one thing with the like, okay, we're gonna prioritize like a vertical layout as opposed to horizontal. um then I would want to be designing to whatever it is that you know we're focusing on at any given time, just so we can optimize it and get the best result possible out of whatever that may be. um
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know, I think if we again just think of it as like, yeah, it's going to be horizontal, we want this to be the default for this experience, then like just making that choice or that decision kind of helps alleviate all of those issues, at least for the time being. um
Yeah, for sure.
and definitely helps provide like a, for me at least, like, okay, now I know the restraints that I'm working within and all of that stuff, so now I can actually get started on like, okay, what do we want this um city map to feel like, and what do we want the dungeon map to feel like, and we can start designing and exploring all of that, and I think that's pretty exciting. um but I do kind of want to keep messing around with our main battle layout, at least for like the next little bit, again like on my end, um because I think that solving that could be, even if it is again like a temporary solution and we end up changing it a million times, between now and launch, I think it would be nice to kind of at least like find what kind of parameters we want to work within, and I think that'll help with like kind of like this big domino effect of moving forward of you know uh what do these dungeons look like, what does it consist of, or what does our like key play feel like, um if we kind of figure this out. Does that make sense, or am I crazy and it's not that important
No, no,
for the moment?
yeah. No, I think it completely makes sense.
Cool.
It's really important for us right now that the fight should be the actual combat should be like as far along as that should be the furthest thing along, because that's really where
We'll
all the
know if
fun
this
happens,
is
right?
fun,
Yeah,
if
like
this
if
is
you
working.
like Dark Souls is a cool concept, but if the combat was trash, it's not a game. Like there's
Right.
nothing to it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and yeah, and the same is true for a much closer comparison of like Snap's interface and progression,
Yeah.
all that is like quite cool. But if the battles didn't work, it's just not a game.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. um so I have all these layers in here of just like the different things I had been working on, and again, this to me was two uh very the very first kind of iterations of anything of where do I want to start with this? What does this look like? And uh oh hey, how's it going? That's
Yeah, this is
Morgan.
dope.
um
I,
yeah,
was- I
I
really these layouts are super handy for visualizing it and discussing it as well. Like when I saw these, I almost kicked myself in the head. This should have been the first thing we did. Like I know, easy said than done, but I was like, yeah, yeah, it's so hard to discuss around it when we have nothing to reference, and now we
yeah,
do.
exactly.
I immediately have thoughts, and
Please. I would
those
love to hear.
thoughts haven't we've not discussed because we've had nothing to discuss around. Yeah. So first of all, I mean it's great. It's better than I mean I can do
Better than
I can
nothing.
get started. Yeah, I was going to say, and what we have right now is effectively nothing. Where are we? Yeah, here. This better than that, better than this, which is not saying much, but saying something. So I think my thoughts could be summarized as like a couple of things. So the way that the deck hand card management works is in theory, you have three piles. You have a draw
Okay.
pile, a discard pile, and a hand.
Yeah,
A
okay.
hand isn't really a pile for argument's sake. So I can see here. So I really want to see your enemy's one as well as yours. One of the most fun things about Magic for me and like deep card games is when you're manipulating your enemy's deck. So you're like stopping them from drawing, or you're forcing them to discard, and the way that a discard deck then shuffles up and becomes a draw deck is quite normal in card games, and that seems to be normal in ours at the moment. But in Magic, that doesn't really happen, right?
Hmm.
Once it's in your discard pile, it's in your graveyard. That's what it's called.
Yeah. But then
So
there's
I think
also
it might,
like certain element or like certain cards that have like, oh,
yeah,
go into your
bring this
graveyard and,
exactly.
look for two cards of this type or whatever. So okay. Adding so this was out I was again like oh wait, I'm missing a thing. Um
And and then the other thing I was going to say was, um, maybe this is me because I'm like because we're building it, but I found it super
mhm.
useful to be able to count, to be able to see the number of cards in the draw, discard, and hand, like to
Mm.
know. Marvel Snap do this thing, which I find really interesting. There we go. How long into the stream are we? We almost got a full 20 minutes into the stream before I brought up a screenshot of Marvel
Before
Snap.
mentioning Snap.
Uh, new, but
A
yeah,
new
new
record.
record. Yeah, it's so good. Wow, we're really pushing the boat out here. Are they really not going to show it? Um, that's going to be so annoying if I can't
I'm
find it.
trying to think of
PC
even
deck. So this is here we go. Here we go. This is exactly what I wanted to show. So, oh, of course, potato quality, please. No, yeah, this would be the good one. Okay, so it's interesting. You play on
oh.
you play on your phone, and um, you don't give this much thought. You just battle and you're happy, right?
Mhm.
If you are playing against a player that's on PC, which, as best I can tell, happens just as much as playing against someone on their phone, they get a view like this, which is that they can see exactly what cards they've drawn, exactly what cards they haven't drawn. So you, if you're on mobile, you may have your opponent may have like destroyed your Thanos, but they did it
Mhm.
as their first card. If you play, I can't remember the card's name, but there's a card that costs one that destroys a card from your opponent's deck. Right now, if they destroyed Thanos in the opener, you forget that. You're
Yeah.
waiting for Thanos the whole game, but your opponent will know what is and isn't in their deck. Um, this is almost like perfect memory as like a feature for PC players. I find that very interesting that at any time a PC player can check what they've got left to draw. And in Magic, they do the opposite, which is you can always check your discard pile. You can always check your
Yeah.
graveyard. And it's for the reasons you said. It's for the like graveyard mechanics. You just need to know what's in there. Um, So the count is useful. The sorting through it is very, very useful, but it makes the game, it almost slows it down. Like, it means that these cards feel like they have much more weight to them. If we're in a game where, if we're running a game where the cards they go from your hand to the discard pile, and then they go back into your draw deck, and they go round and round and round. If they just go round endlessly and there's not really a way to destroy cards, it doesn't really matter. Like, looking through them, you can kind of, there's 12 cards, you remember them, it's no big deal.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so could be convinced with any of these routes. But I find Snap's approach interesting to, like,
Is interesting.
on mobile, you can't tell what's in your deck, you remember. On
Right.
PC, you're inherently told all points in time.
It is interesting. So I any my experience with Snap is primarily on mobile. Like I
in my
the majority of the time, same thing with Arena. Like I'm almost always playing it on just my phone.
Yeah.
I've started as specifically with Arena, I've started playing a bit more on PC and stuff like that. So, and it
Mhm.
is like there's just like these small kind of quality of life things that it's like, oh, that's really nice, like that it adds to the mobile experience, but I don't ever feel like, I mean, if I'm like playing and I've been playing for, any amount of time on PC or on desktop, whatever, and then switch over to my phone, that immediate thing is like, oh man, like it was nice when I could do this, but it doesn't ever feel like, coming from or starting from mobile or something like that. It doesn't really feel like you're missing out on anything. Like it feels like a fully functional, same thing with Snap. Like it feels good. It's fun and it's fast loops and, nothing too crazy, but um then,
Yeah.
if you go and sit down and like load it up on desktop, there might just be those like minor things where it's like, oh man, I didn't even know this existed, and this is like really nice, or like a really nice like quality of life thing. Um, because I didn't even know that that was a thing with Snap that you
Yeah.
could like look and view that on the like desktop version, and I've played it like on PC uh a fair amount, but just never really paid attention to it, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Man, that is interesting. I think that, I mean, specifically for mobile, I think that that would have the potential to be chaotic if unless it's like some kind of something not necessarily like on screen at any given time, but instead is like, you know, we have like our little like cogwheel or like our little gear or something for like our settings, or like I don't know, like a
Yeah.
backpack or something to like go into your inventory or whatever it might be. And then there could be like, oh yeah, check, you know, your current status of your deck or whatever. Like unless it was like in some kind of like sub menu maybe. Like I think
Yeah.
that works for mobile instead of like um potentially like, oh yeah, it is this big thing that like uh why is, oh, because it's way down here, buried by everything else. Let's see, what did we do wrong? Because again, I know something I'm like kind of semi concerned about is just wanting things to remain legible on like a smaller screen. Why is this not showing up?
What are you trying to get to show up?
I'm just trying to make a shape. It shows that it's there. Okay, now it works. Uh, the the previous two times that I did it, it did not work. Um, so like, okay, uh, also no. Um, so okay, I think if we're looking at it like how Snap had it on theirs or whatever, where they have this like kind of box almost where you can just um see the cards remaining at any given time. Um
Yeah.
Again, I'm not familiar with that uh mechanic or like that screen in um so like okay, say it's like is it just like an icon or something that you like press and then it expands to then be like a menu of some kind?
I actually I
Or
actually
is it
don't
just
remember.
always
I've I've
there?
I've seen it on stream,
Okay.
and I don't remember how it's popped out.
Worth worth looking into. I'll do that uh sometime. And just open it and see what's going on. Because I don't remember. I know that I've never used that, but it would be interesting to how how can you do that, or how can we implement that in a way that's like not ugly. I think that the instead of having it be something that's like always on screen, um so like
Yeah, it should pop up. Like
it
I
should
fully
be
agree.
like
It
it
always on
is
screen works because Snap's a mobile game ported over.
right.
You'd be borderline unhinged to just put that in your main like actual
That
game
it's just
design on
always
page.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, you should always see your full deck. That's crazed behavior in my book.
I mean, that is interesting though. That is like an interesting concept cuz like okay, I think if you're playing like Magic at like a sealed tournament or something like that or like playing like physical cards like with your friends or whatever. That's not really something that you do like whatever game it is like Pokemon or
Mhm.
god, what is the Lorcana, the Disney one, or Magic,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Like, sure, what cards are in a deck because you've spent hours, like meticulously putting things together that you hope work uh, until you like test it. Um, but it's not. There's never like that's part of play necessarily where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna like pick up my draw pile and like shuffle through to see like where these cards not even like and I know that that's not what it is. It's not able to see um
The order.
the order. It's just to see what's still left, what's still remaining. But I
But
think that that's
interestingly, in Magic, you are allowed to look through your graveyard at any time,
in your
and people
graveyard. Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's handy because
Oh,
you
it for
can,
sure
through
is.
process of elimination, you know what you've got left to draw.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean that's I think a more so I made some notes yesterday when I was on stream just stuff came up and was like, "Hey, I got to remember to ask about this," or like stuff that I think is worth talking about. Um, so this is a good segue into that of um okay, so we should be able to see our deck. We should in theory be able to see our graveyard pile also. Um so let's just copy this a handful. This has been an interesting challenge I've created for myself of wanting to making this obnoxiously like already kind of just like thick design and then trying to figure out like how can I like offset these or like whatever to just like create any kind of interest in when you see them as a deck or when you see them in a discard pile or whatever. But
Mm.
having like a obnoxiously kind of thick card design, I think, is maybe providing some interesting challenges that I maybe didn't anticipate. Um, but also maybe I'm just entirely overthinking it, and this is very annoying. Okay, so good enough. What are you? Are you the top one? Okay, so maybe a dumb question on your side of things.
Yeah.
Is there so I know one thing that has been kind of like I was gonna say weighing on me. I feel like that makes it sound so serious. Like I just lay awake at night
Yeah.
this. Which also
As you should be.
isn't untrue. I am very very often just laying there like trying to problem solve a million different things. So okay.
Hey, look at look at the plaques.
Oh yo. Oh, that looks cool. Nice.
A little bit, they're a bit blurry.
Are
I
they?
don't know
Okay,
why.
I can either scale
No, I
them
think
up
it's
if they
me. I
need
think
to be.
it's my end. I've got like 15 numbers to play with, so I should work out why they're blurry before we.
And if there are I know something we had talked about last week on stream. I just realized is there no music playing? Big die.
I can check.
It is not. Man,
No
there we
music.
go. Sorry about that. Anyone who cared? I hadn't even realized it stopped. Um what was I saying? If I need to just make like different sizes or lengths of those, like oh here's like the small one, here's the medium one, here's the large one, whatever, I can absolutely do that and it will take only a couple minutes. um so it is not a problem at all. That looks really cool though.
That's
um
a big upgrade, eh?
yeah, yeah,
You
definitely.
did the hard work, but it's still a big.
I didn't do anything really. um so okay, okay, the things that I have no idea how, and I understand that it's just like adjusting like kind of like X, Y, and Z values of things. And that's very cool that is as simple as it can be for some of these solutions. Um So when it comes to something like doing like the parallax effect of things, um, it is very cool to me that uh you can just you can do that. Like that's something you have control over and that you can kind of go in and manipulate on your end. Um so that raises so many other possibilities. And I now just have more questions of like, so wait, if you can do that, like something that I had been kind of thinking, like, how would I even have to, you know, design an element or an asset in order to make something like that possible? Um, it's already been resolved because you're like, oh yeah, look, I change a number and then something crazy happens. Um, so what what would it look like, and is it a possibility, or is this just unhinged and like it would be way too much work than it is even remotely worth um to have so similarly to like like how we had talked about like, oh, there might be like different like animations for our hard actions or anything like that. Is it possible to just create this like random modifier of like, oh yeah, when you see your deck, they're kind of like randomized to be offset each individual thing. So it like
Oh
creates
yeah,
this
that's
like
fine.
stagger effect. Is that like a
Yeah, that's 100%
crazy
fine.
lot of extra work? That it's like, oh yeah,
No,
when a
no.
card goes to the discard pile, that it just like gets like a 5-degree off tick. So they're like kind of offset from each other. Or
No, no, I can probably do that tonight. Like it's very,
okay.
very
Okay.
it's
I
yeah.
That is incredible. That's very cool. And again, like entirely one of those things where it's like I don't know what that looks like for you. Or if that's like, oh, that would be, so much extra stuff or like so many extra steps and then it, you know, whatever. Versus exactly like that where you're like, oh, I can do that and that's literally nothing. Uh
No, no, yeah, that's
that
fine. But
is very
it's a really
exciting.
good point though, because it's worth asking because if the opposite is true, then you're like, okay, cool, that's the thing I need to do. I need to add that to my
Exactly, like,
list.
then it's like,
That's
"Okay,
what we
now I
want.
know that I, don't that's not an option, let me just not worry about it then." Cool. That's really cool. Um, so, okay, with let me ask you some of these questions that I had made note of, I'm I installed a new whiteboard in my office, so I've been taking notes like crazy, no
Yeah,
more sticky
yeah.
notes.
These really
I
have been weighing on you in the middle
Yeah,
of the night. Like,
look, it has
where's
been.
where's,
Uh
where's the pen?
Because I know myself and like I know when I'm like working on something or trying to like design for something, I'll run into these problems or questions and be like, oh, I need to like write that down because if I don't, I'll never remember it again until like months later, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I meant to ask about this, and now it's too late. Um, so I'm trying to get better about taking notes and all that stuff, just to be better organized. Um,
Yeah.
so it looks like I'm looking at nothing, but I'm looking at our whiteboard here. Um, so okay, and a few of these I may have typed in like a massive thing to you the other day.
Mhm.
Just as like one of my like brain dumps of like I'm having a million thoughts. I know you're doing very important actual other things, but I have to type it or else it will be gone forever.
Mm.
Um,
Sure. Yeah, it's fun.
so if I'm repeating myself, okay. Or
Then
that's why, I guess.
it makes great content for our stream. That's
Yeah,
why.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the questions, and these are in no particular order, just like a stream of like conscience dump onto paper or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
all related around what is it that we need or want of this space for our key like battle UI layout. Um, so the first question I said, or I'm trying to like ask or solve myself when working through this was, is there a need for a middle lane? And what I mean by that is like this middle third
Yeah.
of the stage. And if the answer was
Yeah.
no, like, so my because Morgan came home and saw that I had written a million notes like a madman, and she was like just reading them and was like, "Oh, what does this mean?" And I was like, uh, trying to explain or like trying to justify my questions to someone else, which always helps
Hmm.
to talk through. So, okay, if for example, so what I have laid out here in this little mock-up that I threw together yesterday on stream is, so one of the questions too I had asked in that like massive dump was like, how many cards are in a hand at a time before you either, if you've like overdrawn or something, in most card games it's like, oh, you've reached, plus the capacity, you're gonna have to choose to discard one of your cards, or play a card this turn. um so just for something to start with and something to look at, started with 5 cards in a hand. And then this card is assuming player one, you play a card. What happens when you play that card? I know that we had talked previously about some things that could look like. So say like, okay, you have your hand and they're all they're all there, and you decide I'm gonna play this dagger, and there will be little markers on the card that lets you know how much damage it does, and if it does, additional modifiers or additional status conditions. So it'll say like, oh, dagger, and it does 1 damage and maybe like 1 pierce damage. Um, whatever that may be. So you play a card. We had talked about like, oh, it'd be cool, like the dagger like kind of like levitates off and like strikes the opponent's like avatar, and then we would see
Yep.
like a strike animation across their avatar. Um,
Hmm.
which could be cool. I think that that's really fun. Um, so that's one option. I know that there's other games where like the whole card kind of just like physically, like, okay, you play it, it like goes, it waits until the end of the play cycle or whatever, and then like once you press confirm, it will like, the whole card will go and like strike the enemy. Um, that's an option too. Uh, but then like, then what? So like, what are our, I think that's something that's worth kind of like exploring or resolving. And maybe this is like a little bit too early, or maybe like kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but um just when you play a card, what happens to that card? So again, is it like, okay, card, it animates, attacks, and then it immediately like it's done, it like, you know poofs into smoke and then appears in your discard pile or something? um or is it just something like snap or magic where it's like, okay, I play this card and now it is on the field, it is the card that I'm playing. um you know
Yeah.
if I need to, if I want to use it or something or whatever, there's maybe like a tap action or something like that that has to take place. Um, so that this is what I meant by like, is there a need for a
Yeah.
middle lane? So like, if this is your opponent's card of, oh yeah, they played a card, and it's now like on their side of the field. Do we do we need that, or is it like an instant
No.
like
So
transaction
in
almost?
theory, the way it is right now, all cards are like instants in Magic, so they don't. There's
Yeah.
no need for things in the fields. Things don't
Okay.
stick. You can't tap things.
Perfect.
In
That's what
theory,
I
that's the way it
thought.
currently plays.
Okay.
Um, and if we could have like a cool design around that, I think that's worth keeping. Like, I love the. I, I would love to explore the depth that we can get from the gameplay
Yeah.
without having to have like you play monsters on the field.
Yeah.
Um, like Snap's the opposite of this, right? Everything sticks.
Yeah.
Magic's almost the opposite of this. Almost everything
Yeah.
sticks. I think if you want to keep the game fast moving, I think it's really cool that all your cards just resolve and then
It's like
disappear
an
into a discard
instant. Yeah,
pile.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think also that if we're fairly confident we're going this route at this point. If
Okay.
it's swords and shields and spells and potions and so forth, I think it makes sense. I think it's cool that you like use a sword and it's like an attack and then you're doing something else. You're not like you don't your shield doesn't appear on the battlefield ready and waiting to do shield things. It
Right.
like resolves, gives you your shield points and then moves on.
Yeah. Cool. That helps a lot. So I think that, well, you had said this in there too, like, um that already to me kind of makes me rethink everything about like this kind of traditional arrangement or like layout, because
Yeah.
if that's the case, we don't need this middle lane at all of like, okay, you have your hand, they have their hand, and it it's all instant kind of stuff, exactly like you said. So what can we do that's more interesting already than this? Um,
Yeah.
so um let's see what else. Let's see what else we had. Uh that's already the first two questions. We already asked how many cards per hand at a time. And that can change. That wasn't anything like it necessarily needs to be solved at this moment. But I do think like most most card games will have a set number for that of this is the limit, you know. Um like some might not, but like uh I feel like there is maybe more times than not like, oh, it's usually like 7 cards or 5 cards or
Yeah.
whatever it might
Magic
be.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so I completely agree, and I think you're right from, like, visually,
Yeah.
the if you could at the moment with saying things like hand size of around 5, deck size of around 12, and it's cool that we could change these numbers later,
Yeah.
but we need something to work with.
Yeah.
What I'm
To
mostly hesitant about having a hard hand size right now,
okay.
um so basically, the answer is yes, we will have one. But my
Yeah.
question is like, I don't really want to build mechanics around what happens when you go past that hand size. Like if you play a draw two card,
Mhm.
that's your seventh card, you've gone down to six. You then need to draw one, and then what happens to your other draw? Does it not resolve at all?
Right.
Does it make you draw it and immediately discard it? Do you draw it and you can choose what you discard? I don't want to deal with those problems. I mean, it's going to matter when you play, of course,
Yeah.
but I,
We'll get
I'd
there
love
when
to be
we
able to
need to.
play most of the game before
Yeah.
we. Yeah, so I'd say there is going to be hand size because if we don't have one, we have the opposite problem, which is
I
you have
have
your
my
entire
entire
deck in your
deck
hand
in my hand. Yeah.
and then you play a draw two. What
Y-
then?
right.
What? Yeah,
Yeah.
like you can't draw a card that doesn't exist. So the card you've played resolves, and then you immediately draw it. Then
Yeah,
you can take
exactly.
unlimited turns. Horrible. All of it is horrible.
Yeah.
But we'll have to fix those horrible things soon.
Yeah. At some
Um,
point. Yeah.
five sounds reasonable to me. In Magic, it's 7.
Yeah.
even in Commander where you have 100 size deck.
Right.
So yeah, 7 sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. I think 5 to 7 is the window, and as long as we just stick with that for the time being, that's good enough at least of a ballpark kind of best guess. Um,
Okay.
that definitely works. So next on this list is what happens to a card after you play it, which we already talked about. We already solved that. It's an instant. We're assuming that our cards, at least for the time being, and what we're rolling with, unless we decide to change our minds. But uh, instant actions pretty much for everything. I like that. Um, so the next question we solved almost like immediately just by talking when we first hopped into stream or first got started of do we see both the deck and the graveyard? Just something I wanted to ask you and remember to ask you like your thoughts on but already got that solved. And then
Yeah.
um
I would love to be able to see both of
yeah,
those.
I agree.
But but I also think it's hard, but I'm not trying to tell you which parts of your role is easy and hard. I think it's hard to you don't have the space in the middle. You only have 12 cards. Your hand size is 5, and I want to see both my draw and my discard pile, and they're distinctly different. Like I don't think
Yeah.
this is like an easy design problem because the games you can go and look at that do this is zero. There's no games that do this. This isn't
Right.
this is new. If we said if we say the cards always stick to the field and you don't really have a discard pile, then you end up in like a snap scenario, which is
Yeah.
quite easy. Like it's very minimal clutter.
I mean, I think
Uh,
it's not a bad problem to solve. I think that like again for me, knowing and defining like what those elements look like or like what elements are required for our core, what makes this play different than anything else, or like what makes our game unique, what are the elements that we want to incorporate. The sooner we know these kind of like solves for things
yeah,
is
yeah,
going to directly impact the design and like the layout for everything, because then I'll know what do I need to account for, what do I need to allow space for. um so this is incredibly
yeah,
helpful for me at least, because if I know like okay, we have a discard pile, we have our deck to draw from, we have our hand, uh all of these things like are uh, crucial. Like okay, these are the core components that make up what we want to showcase in our game. And that's huge. So um the next one, kind of a tangent, but this is the last one, was when I was just trying to lay out like okay, how do we know who we're fighting? So going with trying to find these semi-neutral solutions for whether we're playing this as a solo game versus like computer, and we're
yeah,
like dungeon crawling and grinding and stuff. What does that look like? But also not wanting it to be something that feels completely different than if it is like a 1v1 kind of thing. But I know we've also kind of talked about that too. um
yeah.
so now that's the last question was, do we always have the little like shield marker indicator, or is it like a situational thing to where it's like no, we don't need it for like our base, what makes up whatever. And again, like for anyone that might just be getting here, watching this later, or anything like that. This is all like a maybe 2 minute rough that I threw together. So like all of this is just to occupy space. And will definitely be designed around what these decisions are. But trying to just throw things out there for like, okay, what are the quickest way to symbolize the elements that we want to be seeing on screen at any given time. Um, if we go to player one, um,
So
do
on this one, so having the shield there in your example is super super useful. And I think on my side, like when you're playing, I'm very tempted to just hide it when you don't have any shield.
that's
Um,
perfect.
however, the thing it immediately made me think, and this is a genuine problem that we want to solve sooner rather than later, is having shield isn't the only thing you can have. You can have extra actions. We know that. What does that
Hmm.
look like? You can have eventually you'll be able to have like bless and poison against you and so forth, and these have numbers and icons, and those icons will exist on the card and then they're against you as well. And yeah, that is messy, but I'm okay with it being like partially solved now and then solved
Yeah,
nicely later. Like that still sounds fine to me.
I
um
think that an easy, yeah, I agree. Um,
I did the while we were talking, I did the card scattering thing,
oh,
by the way.
nice.
So they're all rotated now, and then on yeah, I can do it on my one actually. I've made it so it's the number of cards you have. So if I keep ending turns, they'll keep drawing. I can see now that
Mm,
he's out of cards,
cool,
and I'm gonna get less and less and less and less, and then there's nothing.
nice.
And he's
That's
going
cool.
through his around the house. And yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah. That will
I
look
like that.
much better when your cards are zooming off the pile while they're
Right.
just teleporting. It looks a bit like random, but
Yeah. Um, that is interesting. So I think is I'm trying to figure out how to word the question that I'm having.
okay.
When you okay, you get hit by a card that deals poison damage. Are we going to how simple versus how like complex do we want that to be? So is it like, okay, here is the, whatever, the poison katana or whatever it is. And it are we going to do like it deals 5 base damage but then an additional 2. How do you envision this working? So do you want it to be like,
Yeah.
oh well, like, while, and maybe again, maybe this is thinking too far ahead or like throwing things out there that might not be crucial in this moment, but I'm trying to think from like this design perspective, or like how we can visualize this in a cool way. um do we want it to be like something that it's like, oh yeah, while you're poisoned you take 1 additional damage per turn? Is it something like
Eh,
that, or is it
eh,
like they can keep hitting you with like different poison cards and it'll keep just like stacking like that?
yeah.
Or is it just
Yeah.
like
So no,
you're
annoyingly,
poisoned until you're not?
my answer's kind of going to be both.
Yeah.
So there is two kinds of poison. What did I call the other one? Wound. So if you are, these might not be the right words, but let's say that we use these words.
Yeah.
If you're poisoned, any damage you take gives you an additional damage. So that number's super important, right? If you have a poison of 3 and you take 1 damage, you're actually going to take 4.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the other one is wound, which is kind of like what I'd say is more traditional poison in games. I imagine you might flip these two. Okay. Pretend I didn't say any of that.
I've already forgotten everything.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to flip these two. So what I just described to you was wound. Okay, so wound makes you take an additional damage every time you take damage. You're already wounded. If you've got 2 wounds and you take 1 damage, you take 3. So wound just makes all damage hurt more. Then there's
Okay.
poison, which you're probably familiar with in lots of games, which is at the beginning of your turn, for each poison you have, you take a damage. You
Okay.
start to die. And I think I will have it so that this is guessing, but I'm guessing that poison will be balanced in a way that each turn you remove a poison as well. So you if you have 5, you'll take 5 and then it will go to 4 and it will like count down as you
Okay.
take the damage.
Oh, that could be
That's
cool.
kind of how one of these work. Yeah, actually, both Brittle and Bless, which I've implemented but no cards used currently, that's how they work. So if you have Bless 5, that gives you double damage for 5 turns. And then each turn you lose a Bless. Just if you have Bless, every turn, at the beginning of
Yeah.
every turn, you lose a Bless.
I like
So
that.
at the end of a turn, beginning. Oh, damn, I should check that. That's going to be important because you're either blessing for your next turn or you're blessing for your current turn, and that has a very different setup to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what
Yeah.
Bless and Brittle do. So you want to see, between you and the enemy, you want to see, so attack is inherently tied to your health, but defense is shield, action is turns, which is super important. Then you've got draw. I guess draw resolved immediately. Heal resolve immediately. Pierce resolves immediately. And then everything else does not resolve immediately. So
Right.
bless, brittle, disarm, muddle, wound, regenerate. Sight could resolve immediately. Who even knows if that will get implemented? Stun, confuse, war. Yeah, all of these things, basically all of them except for a couple, won't resolve immediately. So they'll need to show on the player
Yeah.
and on the enemy as well.
I like that. I like it. So okay. Man, I I think that that's a very cool idea of like, okay, you've been poisoned and you now have this like 5-turn marker on you of like for the next 5 turns you will take an additional damage just from this poison or whatever.
Yeah.
Because then, you can have the poison marker, it starts at 5 or whatever, and then it marks down each turn until it's gone. What happens if you get hit with poison, you have this 5-turn poison marker on you, and then the next turn they hit you with another poison? Does it stack on top of that now you have 10 poison on top of you? Because I feel like that could be
Yeah.
that could be crazy. Or do we
My
have it
assumption is,
kind of like how we talked about with health or like HP, where it's like it can only like the max is this. Like if you've been poisoned, it's at 5 or it's at X, and then that is the limit. So if you get hit with it again or something, say like, oh, it's at 5 and then 2 turns have passed and then you get hit with poison again, instead of adding 5 to like the additional 3 you had left, it would just go back to 5. Or what are your
yeah. So
thoughts on this?
my assumption with all of these is that they work the same as shields currently work. So if you have 3 defense, I've called it defense.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
knows what we'll end up landing on? If I
I think
have
defense absolutely
three,
works.
if I have 3 defense, then I play a card that gives me 1. I just go to 4 defense. It just goes up by the amount of the card that I've played. So
Hmm.
if all of my cards had poison on, I would be increasing their poison loads and loads and loads and loads. but they
Okay.
won't take it until their turn, right? Yeah.
So
Anyway,
it
I guess
just
for us right now, it's pretty clear that we're going to end up with lots of effects that you're going to want to see on both you and the
and
enemy.
the enemy.
And the
Yeah,
shield is a good representation of one of several of those, right?
sure.
And some of them are heavier than others. Shield is not heavy. Shield is good to have. But brittle, which doubles the damage you take, brittle one, it could lose you the game. Like you see
Right.
that symbol on yourself, and it's basically like shield up now, or you probably will die. Because the enemy dealing double. Yeah, so but from a like space and design point of view, like from a visual aspect,
Yeah.
we we,
I
we, we want a
think
really clear indicator of all of them, right? And you're unlikely to have like 7 or 8 on you at a time. You'll
okay.
have your health, and then you'll probably have a couple on you and a couple on the enemy.
Okay.
Um,
That
I think
Thank you
probably
for saying that.
almost definitely.
That helps. Cuz I feel like I have things that could be cool to where like okay, say you know this green marker represents player 1. It is your avatar in our game. Um there's the obvious solution or whatever is like okay, then we have additional markers on things. So like okay, you get hit with massive, but make our brush a little bit small. So you get hit with like blood loss or bleed or whatever, and like you now have this blood marker. You've been hit with uh 3 blood loss or whatever, and it can be like just like a low blood drop. Um obvious like solution is something like this where each status condition has this. Oh, you've been poisoned, maybe it's like, a green skull for like, oh, I've been hit with poison or something, and then like all of that's like knocked back or something, and then like you see like the big, oh, I have like a big 4 on top of it. Maybe there's no eyes, it's just a green whatever uh
Mm,
cloud. um
yeah,
Keeping things simple for simplicity's sake. So the something like this is, I think, the easiest solution, where then you can have all these different indicators that represent um whichever afflictions you may be burdened with at any given time. And whether we put them up here or like around the, I was thinking like a name placard kind of thing, like hey,
yeah, yeah.
this would be like your username or um whatever. Again, that with this assumption of like, whether this says like the Goblin King, like it's an NPC boss fight, or if it's like, you know, your friend's username and you're doing something that way. Was my initial thoughts behind this. So, it could be these little symbols or markers that kind of like
I like that.
frame the nameplate. Something I think would be really cool, but an immediate thing with this is, if this is the case, how if this is the case, or if this is like an approach we're interested in going in, I don't know at this moment. I'm stuck on how would you represent multiple status conditions or inflictions at one time if we went this other way. So I was thinking like, okay, say you get hit with poison and like, your guy is here. You got your low profile guy and you're ready to fight. Um, so this is you. This is your character.
No,
And
I could tell that was me because it looks like me.
exactly. Uh, so what if there's like in this frame that we've built for ourselves or whatever, and this obviously again will be like much more thoughtful and whatever the further we move along. I gotta remember to keep my screen within this window so the stream can see it, because I have a tendency to move my canvas all over the place and it gets chopped off. So I'm trying to limit that a little bit. Whatever. So again, this will be whatever we decide. It will be like one cohesive thing, whether it's like one big frame that like has this little offshoot of a nameplate that says your username here, or whatever we settle on. But if this is an approach that we take, that we want to maintain, like, okay, we see your avatar profile picture in some kind of frame, and then say you get afflicted with poison or whatever, and we have this frame that we've designed or whatever, it could be cool to have like, okay, you've now been hit with poison, and uh now your whole, like, the whole frame of this becomes like marked by that affliction. So maybe there's like a green overlay on your picture, but not just that. There's like design elements, like, oh, the whole frame becomes like coated in like slime or something, of like, oh, I've been poisoned, and now I got the ick and I'm covered in slime or whatever. And like, that could be cool to where like, okay, now your whole avatar framing thing has been affected by this change, and that's kind of the visual representation. And then like, there could be like a marker that says like 5, and then next turn it drops 4, like something like that. um but
So
if
I actually love I love the idea of both. So I like the idea. I think it's cool. I think well, I love the idea of both. So you have the clean indication of status effects that are happening, but
Mhm,
I also think it would be super cool if like you get blessed, a little halo appears above the avatar's head. You get
mhm,
poisoned, it starts to go sickly green. You get injured,
that'd be
is
cool.
like face gets like scarred and like I just think that
Yeah.
would be super cool. And you
I,
could layer them like if they a lot of them wouldn't need if they didn't overlap, you'd just layer them, and if they did overlap, you'd just show some of them because you wouldn't check the picture like, am I poisoned right now?
right.
It would be you ever play the original Doom? How the face gets more fucked
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
not you
That
don't want that to be your
okay.
only health indicator, but you want
Yeah,
that vibe. You want
yeah,
to be like,
yeah.
oh, I'm
I
fucked up
agree
right
with
now.
that. To where like, okay, and
Yeah.
that is cool, because then you could like, um I like that. So then this perfectly circles back in talking about this to resolving something we've already talked about, of like, uh what do we how do we want to do this? Like, so is it something like Snap or Magic or whatever, where you choose from like a roster of characters, and maybe you unlock different avatars as you move along, and it's like, oh cool, now I
Well,
can play
so
as
so
this
for me
guy or whatever.
this is like this ties back entirely to the feature we're both hyped for previously, which is the Beastmaster, where you could
Yeah.
start with your Bob, the human fighter, and maybe there's a variant where you can choose a different picture, but you only have him. And then as you collect creatures and feed them so that you have them and they're playable, you'd unlock the other avatars. This has another advantage to us, which is that like as the developers, which is that the enemies' pictures, as you defeat them, will get added to your collection. Like you'll kill enough goblins, you'll unlock the goblin, you'll be able to play as the goblin, and then instead of seeing it as an enemy picture, you'll see it as your
It's
picture.
you. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
way, we don't have to draw like 1,000 avatars. You instead draw
Because I
one
was
for
gonna
each
say that
enemy,
that is
and you eventually play as them.
a a part of it for sure, where it's like, okay, so if we go that route, which okay, whatever. Um, I don't really have any preference for this of like, oh, that's too much. I don't want to do that because hey, if that's gonna be what's coolest or whatever, then okay, that's what I want to do. Um, but I think that like establishing or resolving this early on, I think is like it will help with like just adding to that that task list of what is needed. How many default avatars do we want to start with that players can pick from? Do we have two, like, something like two or three that it's like, hey, here are your default avatars, you get to pick your character, and that just is
Yeah,
what it is.
I would have
um
2 or 3. Like, I think you
yeah.
want to unlock more. So the first
Yeah,
choice, if like I'm really clinical about it, should probably be like man, non-binary woman. Like
that's
if you
yeah.
just have if it's just a human and it's boring and it's unexciting, just have 3 options so that
Yeah.
people feel reasonably, "Oh yeah, that'll do." You don't even want it to be like, "This is awesome," but to be like,
Yeah.
"That'll do."
It's just
And
like,
and then
okay.
later you can unlock the cool one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Cool. So yeah, because if we do it that way, and exactly like you said, like, okay, once you clear this dungeon, you finish this boss fight or whatever, then you unlock, that avatar as a possibility. Um, and then just knowing where we can start and what we're starting with, um, definitely helps because for each of those, I would want to like design whatever status condition uh on top of like their
Mhm.
default base kind of, you know avatar state. And then uh yeah, like, okay, what does this character now look like now that they've been poisoned, now that they've been hit with brittle or bleed or whatever. um yeah,
Yeah.
I that's I'm taking notes again, so I don't forget anything. And then yeah, that's cool. And then I know that you have like been like, can I please just have the Goblin King? Like, I'm begging you,
Yeah.
please. I
Give it
want the
you
Goblin
t
King.
you teased it on stream, and now I'm not allowed the Goblin King.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Do
Because I feel
I
like
have to unlock
for
him
for
first?
me, so much of it again, like very uh avoidant personality type of like,
Y
okay, I don't want to do it, but also I can justify it because we don't know how we're gonna see that. Like, is it gonna be like this where it's like, oh, it's a frame with whatever additional details, or is it, do we approach it in a something completely different where it's like, uh that screenshot I had sent you last night where um what's this game even called again?
Crypto.
No, not ours. Not our
I knew
game.
you meant another game, but I don't know which.
Card Crawl Adventure. Um looks this isn't like for a battle UI by any means. This is entirely
Oh yeah. I remember this.
just like a like when you're in your like main hub kind of thing. Looks like if when you like go into your bar room tavern kind of thing and you're uh choosing which dungeon you want to kind of like start exploring, um this is kind of what we're looking at, where it tells you, and this is the grainiest quality picture imaginable, but pretty much what you're looking at here is just you walk in, this is you as the character you've selected to play as. Each
Yeah,
character in this game has like, you know, a different play style, different advantages that they can do. And it's all just entirely personal preference on like what you're feeling at the moment. So then when you go in and you talk to this guy in the tavern, you're saying like, okay, what is it that you do? What is this fight? What is this dungeon going to look like? And this is kind of how you like encounter them, is where, you know, each kind of like boss of that dungeon is sitting at their own table within this tavern, but it's very kind of like immersive and magical, where it's like, oh, you go up and talk with him and like his entire background looks very unique to him and like his dungeon
yeah,
type. um so, you know, if we wanted to do something like this where it's like, okay, again, this is not how this play looks when you actually play a match of this, but like if you can see this like blurry potato card, the most blurry thing imaginable, right? But you get the gist. This is what this boss would look like as a card in that dungeon, where still you see the character illustration and he's still just kind of like sitting behind this kind of like a crate or a desk or something like that. And then you see
yeah,
he has 15 HP and like 2 defense or something like that. And then he has like an additional modifier that is indicated through text. Um, but if we get rid of all that and stick to, not stick to, but if we decided that we wanted it to be that you're not actually fighting these enemies like in physical combat or whatever it may be, but instead, if again hypothetically, we chose to mess around with kind of something more like Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like, oh, this the card game is what you're playing. Like you are playing
yeah,
and dueling each other with decks that you've built, and like that's how you're resolving your issues. You just go to like different dungeons, and that's kind of like different card tournaments or, you know, whatever it may be, and you're just like facing off against like that specific like deck type master. um Not saying that that's at all what we're doing, but it would be fun. And Miracle Merchant does this too, where um it feels very immersive, where like you walk up and like, you know, it all kind of, that game takes place like from a first person POV. You don't see like your hands or anything like that, but like you are working behind the counter at a shop, and like the different customers like walk up to you and you have to like play specific card combinations in order to craft whatever it is that that customer is looking for. um but what you're
yeah.
seeing is like the countertop, and then the other side of the counter where the customers walk up to you at the desk to, you know, tell you what it is that they want. If that was something we were interested in, of that kind of like, oh, the card game is the the key story element or whatever, then we would want maybe something like this for a design where it's like, oh yeah, it's not just like, a bracket and like a nameplate or whatever, and then like a playmat type setting. Rather, you're, you know, walking in and immediately like there's the boss, the enemy, whoever it is you're fighting is like seen kind of sitting within the environment, and then like the card game itself plays out on the table in front of you. Um
Mm.
like that would be an entirely, I think that like the way that I approached, and maybe this is entirely crazy because if you see that like okay, like on his card for this specific boss, like the illustration is pretty much identical. But when you're in this menu or whatever, this skeleton boss character is like animating a little bit. Like, you can see him like breathing and like, like moving around and stuff like that. Um, Whereas, obviously like when you're in battle or if you like encounter this boss card, it's just like a static card. Um, so if I what how I'm justifying avoiding this is, well, if I know that it's just going to be like a flat or even like subtly animated, but just as like a profile picture type thing, I'm going to approach that differently than the other scenario, like what we were just looking at of like, okay, this character is like someone you're interacting with, like he's sitting in the room with you when you see him, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, it's just like a little player icon kind of thing. um
Yeah.
does that make any sense at all? I know that that's a lot of nothing.
No, it makes complete sense. I you really need to know what circumstances it in used in, what what different what different ways it can be viewed. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be really hard to get the right illustration, the right picture for the job. You
Because
know,
like I could, and if this is genuinely like the best use of time at this stage, I'm I'm all for it, and we can explore all of these possibilities of like, what is possible, what do we want to look at, how do we want this to feel. um but it could, if it's, again, that's why I'm trying to like approach this from so many different angles at the same time, to be like, okay, what are the key elements that we want to have no matter what. And that means, okay, obviously you
yeah,
get to see your deck, obviously, or your hand. You see your hand, you see your deck, you see your discard pile. Perfect. We're all those steps closer to refining the key ingredients of like, okay, here's the things that I know that I want to include and like prioritize, um when we when I try and solve this problem of what does this look like? What is uh what needs to be visible? Um so this is all very helpful. Where is this? Right there. Yeah, so cuz I think that like, again, for me, and trying to like uh solve for a lot of different questions without uh knowing what I'm necessarily trying to like, I might be solving unnecessary problems
mm,
at any given time is where I've been lately. Um because like we could even have, you know, the deck and discard pile could be something like this, where it's like, I don't know, let's reverse these two. Maybe they're down here and they kind of sit slightly off screen, or we have, if we go with like again kind of like a traditional like playmat type structure, like thinking very um you know traditional tabletop games. um we could have it something like this, where it's like, okay, the face down cards, that's your deck. The face up cards is the graveyard. um then it's like, okay, well, where does that go? Where do we want that to go? Do we want like, your deck to be positioned like, where do we want to see that? But then also, if all of this is unnecessary, of like, oh well, we don't really like a more like traditional like playmat style. um we want to like go like full immersion. Then it's like a different a different set of problems to try and solve, I think. um
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
it's like you
Uh,
could, I mean, the possibilities are endless just within like this one specific thing, where it's like, okay, you could have it like, if we stick with having some kind of bracketed name and profile picture type thing. Maybe this is entirely too large, and it'll be much smaller, but um it could be like, oh, your deck is here, then your discard pile is there, like off to the side a little bit more. Or if we know like, they should be like together, like next to each other. um and we kind of want to stick it that way, where like, one is your deck, this is what you're drawing from, and you know the other one that's face up is now your discard pile. um
yeah, that's quite in real card games, that like physical card games. That's quite normal.
yeah.
I think in a digital card game, the face up nature might just be cluttering.
Okay.
Like you're going to
um
see a card face up, which is actually less important than everything else on the board.
is so okay, that's actually a question I had earlier too, when I was asking about like, oh, what is the likelihood of having something like the offset cards or whatever. What does that look like on your end?
Mhm.
A solution would be like, okay, you activate a card, use it, and then it goes to your discard, or like to the graveyard or whatever. Is it possible that like, okay, after we see like, the big singular card be pulled from your hand and used, okay, have this card, I play it, it does its thing, and then it like, spirals out or does its animation, and then is it possible to then just like change the scale of that, then like in that moment, like, okay, it goes here and then it spirals out and whatever, and now it's in the graveyard and it just scales down to be smaller? Because that could be like one way to
Yeah, that's fun.
worry
It
about,
won't.
or like to solve that,
I,
of like, it's still
I
there,
don't
it's
think.
still face
I
up,
don't
but
think it
it's
will look good, and that's not because the quality will be lost or anything. But
mhm,
typically, if you're playing a card game, you want like the cards are bigger and important, right? And you don't.
yeah,
Actually, Snap does it quite well. They kind of shrink down very small when they land,
yeah,
but
exactly,
it's almost like they have a reduced mode. Like it's almost because you still see the important part of the art, but not all of it, and it
yeah,
doesn't just shrink them like fully. Um,
that's interesting. Um,
But yeah. Anyway, it's perfectly possible to shrink them, and we could go with that and decide later that well, actually, it's better not to shrink them. That would
well,
be fine.
I mean that's one option, right? And then if there's so something like arena, they're they have like a card gets exiled and it just
Yep.
goes into this like portal or this like black hole kind of thing that like just kind of sits
Yeah.
next to like your deck or whatever, and then like you can always like click it to expand it. We could do something more like I icon based where it's like, okay, your graveyard is just actually represented like, oh, there's like a tombstone, like,
Mhm.
which not to be confused with all of our other tombstones that we have, but like um it would be like a different symbol, uh like, okay, here's this marker and that is where your discard pile is. It like sits somewhere, and then if you need to like um oh, you played this card and you have the ability to search your graveyard, then you just know, okay, I can click that. Or, maybe it's like a little like skull and crossbones kind of thing. Um,
Do you know what would be cool? Just visually,
mhm.
especially if we don't think that the discard pile is that important.
What's
Is
that?
you could have like a I'm thinking a tombstone or a coffin and maybe a shovel next to it, and you could literally have them
Oh,
buried. They could literally like slide into the coffin lid shuts, and maybe there's a number on top, and you just ignore it. But if you want to pop it open, you can. You click it, and you can see everything that's in there,
man,
and then you
that's
close it again. And do you know what I mean? Like just tuck it out of sight, out of mind, and then fits the theming of there's a little grave. It's literally a graveyard off in the
yeah,
corner of
yeah,
your screen. Um, and then it's very neat, right? It's just it'll all go in there, and you won't open it unless you need to.
man,
This has an added bonus, which is thin but still cool, which is later if there's any effects that affect your graveyard, um, everyone will know what that is. Like you'll inherently know what the game is talking about when it says like
right?
draw all the cards from your graveyard or destroy all the cards from your graveyard. You'll be like, oh, I know exactly what that means.
Yeah,
um, which is good because a discard pile doesn't have that. Because often the cards that are in that pile you didn't discard, you played them, you used them, they
yeah,
got destroyed. You drew them and you didn't have enough hand size. Like you never feels like you discarded them, even though it's often called a discard pile.
right. Um, man, I do, I really do like that. Um, I'm trying to think like
Do you want to go full screen for a minute? We go AFK.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
for
I,
sure.
I, I'm asking you this time because last time I went AFK, that was the exact 30
That was
seconds
the
that
thing it
Twitch.
wanted to set as the thumbnail. I think we found a
Yeah,
way
Twitch was
around
like,
it.
this is the thumbnail. The
Yeah,
10 seconds you were away.
yeah, for sure. No problem. How do you draw this? Often, I know what a coffin looks like. I don't know how to keep that perspective. I mean, that is just looks like that, I guess. I think maybe this just comes out to just be shallow. Uh, how? Oh man, that's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. Um, how's it going, chat? How's everyone doing? If you're just out there lurking, listening to us, if you have thoughts on any of this, please let us know. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to uh get everyone's advice or input, or if there's anything that you think would be um potentially cooler than any of the other ideas we've talked about. We could like definitely have this. I mean, it could just be like a little, or like a scene. That sounds way more intense than thinking, but it could just be like this little element that's kind of, baked into any given uh dungeon layout that you find yourself in. Could be something like that. And then like it just I feel like that is kind of big. Maybe it's somewhere different. So like what if we flipped that and had it become kind of, you know, in this framing of your, or like something on top of your little marker, little profile avatar guy, something like that. Do there. I'm gonna call this one discard, just so I remember that it's a pile, it's a deck that we have at some point. So it could be something like that. I don't know if that's exactly the solution, but that could be kind of fun. Where one day we'll find there. Oh no, it's none of the ones I thought it was. It's this one. Oh, it's not that one. How cool would that would have been good, right? I just said, oh, I forgot I named it Graveyard, and for some reason made it blue. Cool. So, let's see. Just make a. There's 7 cards in our discard pile at this moment in time. Waiting for my to do anything.
I am back.
Sick. Oh, not that one. Welcome back. Happy to have you. Happy you're here.
Good to be back.
That's not. How many times can I do the wrong thing? Expect something different.
If you're as good at it as I am, lots of times.
Exactly. Also I just saw your Discord message a few minutes ago. I don't care either way. It does not matter to me. It wasn't specifically something that I was saving for stream or anything like that, but it absolutely doesn't matter. If you want to, we can absolutely talk about it. Or if you're
Yeah,
like,
let's.
no, let's save it, then okay. I don't care either way.
No, let's do it.
Cool. Okay, so what we're talking about. I don't know how this is not it, but is this kind of what you had in mind of like it could be
Yeah,
like a physical like graveyard almost like okay, you have 7 cards in your graveyard pile. You have your deck that you can draw from and then
yeah.
you know, it there would be some kind of fun integration. Um maybe something like this. Again, this
No, that's
layout
exactly what I
is
meant. I
nothing
think that'd be
even
typical.
remotely permanent, but it is uh what we're kind of rolling with for the moment to at least move some things around and see like what elements do we want to have. Um this. Would you also see that same thing for the opponent to know how many cards they have in their graveyard, or would that be something that like only they see or like only you see on your
Well,
screen?
I think I think it's okay to do it how you've got it now, because you
Because there's
with
another
your
option I
stuff
had.
with your stuff, you can click your graveyard, you can click your draw deck. Both of those should probably show you what's in there.
Yeah, oh for
But
sure.
with the opponent, you can't click their draw deck, which
Yeah,
means if you click their avatar or their draw deck, it will probably just open up like they have 15 cards. Here are the 6 you've seen. Right, that's kind of all you need to know, because they're gonna. You don't know what's in their hand. You don't know how many copies they've got of a card and so forth. So
yeah.
I think like this is fine.
Because I was this is like something I kept going back and forth with yesterday or whatever, which I'm not happy with any of this. So again, like, don't think that I'm like hard set on any of this stuff because it will change. It will look better. Um, but if we see, okay, player one is down here, what might that look like? And kind of ex- trying to solve all those things that we already talked about is like, what do these status conditions look like? Are they additional markers that we need to leave room for, or what will that look like? But then also the mirrored image of that, what do we see from their end? Do we see it something like this so we can see, how
Oh,
much
so that doesn't. So from the enemy's point of view, it doesn't matter because they do this clever thing in Snap is where it's most obvious, which is that the player. There's only ever one player as far as the game's mechanics are concerned. So
Mhm.
even when you're fighting an opponent who's a real person, that from their angle, they're still the player. So you never
Exactly.
play from
Yeah.
the other side of the board. So in Snap, this is most obvious because there's a left lane, a middle lane, and a right lane.
Right.
But for both players, it's left, middle, right. Because if
Yeah.
everything's shifting to the right, it shifts to the right for both players, which
Right.
is super confusing because you're imagining them as sat there and you're imagining them playing around the left right mechanic, but they're not. They
Yeah.
see the exact same view that you do. And it'd be the
Exactly.
same here. If that enemy was a real person, they have the same visibility as a player, and so yeah. So it doesn't have to be mirrored, basically. In
Okay.
fact, we can you don't really have to show anything for the enemy. You could just show like you wouldn't show that. You don't even have to show their cards, right? You could just show their health
Hmm.
and a picture. And when a card resolves, we could just tell you what's happening to you. We could just say
Right.
5 damage coming your way. We want to see their cards because we have me and you have a theory that it's going to be fun to see cool cards and then build the same cool cards later. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean
I get
like
that.
we have to show them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, okay. Time? Like 11:15 for you. What time would you like to take off? Or
I
hop off
I
stream tonight?
I aim to be off before 1,
Perfect.
which is a while away. But I could stretch beyond that, and finishing early is also fine.
Yeah, no. I just want to make sure. That's something I'm trying to personally be mindful about because I always feel bad when you're like, please let me go to bed, and I'm like, oh shit, like I have not been paying attention. So cool.
No,
That is
don't stress it.
absolutely not
I'm probably being intentionally dramatic. I can just say I gotta go by. I won't.
yeah.
If, yeah,
uh
that's fine.
that works too. That's not what so okay. I wanted to just have something that we can move around. So this is very ridiculously large. It does not need to be that big by any means. Um,
But
so
for the enemy, it almost should be right. You're
like that's another thing
it would
of
be,
what I'm like why I did it that way because it's like, well, if that's like again like 1v computer, you want to see that. Like
yeah.
that's the fun part
I
of it is
agree.
like, hey, I this is who
You
I'm
want to
fighting
feel like
against.
you're fighting a goblin.
Yeah,
And the only way you can feel like you're fighting a goblin is if you see the flipping goblin. If you
yeah.
don't see him, you're just going to see like dagger, shield, sword,
Right, and it's
dagger.
like, oh,
Right.
okay, like, this
Cool.
isn't really fun. But I also I would like to find, and maybe this is not the right line of thinking. Because the more I think about it just now in this moment, I'm like, well, I don't think it really matters. What I'm trying to say is I would like to find a solution, whatever this may be, and whatever this looks like, that it doesn't feel, and again, that we maybe this is still like me thinking of whatever and we've already discussed or solved this or whatever. But a lot of what I had been kind of like bumping into is wanting to find a solution that works well for both solo and multiplayer, with the assumption that multiplayer would look like PvP. Like I like I got my deck, I've been working on it. Let's battle each other. But I know we've since talked about that of like, well, it might not, it might not look like that. It may be something like uh we're all as a party going up against this one really difficult, like challenging opponent. Um, because I
Yeah.
think that already is like, okay, well that's a different problem that I would like to tackle or solve. Of how what does that look like in both of those regards? Of what would we want that to look like as a solo player against something big, or what would we want our um hang on, trying to do moderation stuff. We got our second time chatbot spam bot in there, so I'm trying to do moderation things.
Should I pin the message so everyone knows where to get Chet viewers from?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. um
That's pretty sure it's yeah.
I don't know how to do any of this stuff is the problem.
I'm
um
glad because neither do I.
Good. Wait, hold on, I found it.
I want to delete his message though.
I can do that.
Mod view.
Yeah.
I am. I'm in the mod view.
Good timestamp. I don't know. There we go. Bam. Bam. Cool. And then how do I do this? I'm definitely new to this side of doing things. I don't know. Oh wait, here we go. Just like that. Cool.
There we go. Thank you. God, that was annoying me not being able to delete it.
I don't know how to do it in like the whatever they call it on Twitch, the like moderator view, but I know how to do it. It's a lot easier to do it in OBS of just like, oh, delete that
Okay.
message. But um oh, okay. So I guess I could have done it all right there. There's ban, timeout, or delete a message. Perfect. I'll know that for next time. That I can just do it all in OBS. Yeah, of
Cool.
course. So what was I even saying?
We talk about
I
the
don't
different
know.
views. There's a single player view, a multiplayer view,
Yeah, and I don't want it to feel like a
PvP,
different
PvE.
experience going
So
into
I don't.
something.
So my view is that it doesn't. My view
Okay.
is that you are always the player. There's only ever one player, and
Yeah.
it's you. You're always fighting one enemy. We discussed this like a couple of weeks ago, and at first I was like, it's a bit of a limitation this early, but now I'm embracing it, and I think it's actually really cool. It means that UI wise, you're fighting one guy. There's no aiming. Like you don't. Oh, I've got a 4 attack. Let me place that on the enemy.
Right.
Which enemy do I want to attack? I don't love that. The game will be a lot like faster paced if you're just like, I use this card, this card, this card. You're just selecting the card you use. There's no choice to be made. It just happens. I think that's super cool. So there's one enemy, there's one player, and that player is you.
Hmm.
And then if it's PvP in a scenario where we had PvP, that stays exactly the same. You have the
Right.
same visibility on a computer ally as you do on a computer enemy as you do on a human enemy. You can't see their deck. You can see the cards that they use as they use them. You can see their health. One thing that will change with PvP is that we'll randomize who goes first.
Okay.
Most card games where it's PvE, you just go first as the player. The game just like, yeah, you go first. Because it's just ever so slightly more fun to go first.
Yeah, for sure.
So those ones simple, easy. I feel confident about those decisions. The tricky one, which me and you bumped into today, is if you have friends fighting with you, if you have allies.
Yeah.
This introduces a whole whirlwind of complexity from a UI point of view because you want to know how your allies are doing, you want to know how they're contributing. Can you interact with them? Can you not interact with them? Where do they sit on the
Yeah.
UI? You don't want the UI to be different. So in my head, it's like you probably do like a raid bar, like they do in MMOs, where top left of the screen, you'll get like name, health bar, current status on like 3 or 4 different boxes like that, maybe a little avatar next to them. In my head, that's how it would look. But I don't love this. I don't feel like this is a great solution. And there isn't really many co-op games, co-op card games.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it's the biggest problem to overcome. Like, I don't think it's the kind of thing that's going to keep us up at night.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
if we suddenly had co-op tomorrow, I'm confident we'd find a way to make it work.
Right.
Um, I do agree with something you were hinting at earlier, which is like I do think that we can just delay, for lack of a better term, we can just delay this problem till later. Like the
Hmm.
game's playable, the game's fun, we've got a ton of cards, we feel good about it, everything's working well. Let's see how multiplayer goes. Like I think that's a good plan of action rather than let's start stressing co-op now when the game's
Right.
barely playable.
Yeah.
That's kind of unhinged behavior.
I mean, it could
Um,
be something like you said. So I think that the biggest challenges would be, um, like, okay, simple solution. You have guys that you can see, but then how do you see, or like, what would that look like of like, would you would you be able to see their deck at all times, or like their hand at least, to where, like, again,
I,
like,
I
obviously, like, as first player as you're playing, it would always look the same, but would you see, like, some kind of little, let's say we have,
so
um
I don't think you see their stuff. I think you see their health. You might see the status effects attached to them. I
mhm.
don't think you see their deck, their graveyard.
Yeah,
If they
I
use a
think that
card that
agrees.
does like if they use a card that does like attack 3, I think you see the attack 3 come out of them and affect the enemy. And I
Yeah,
think that's enough. I don't like this also if we go this route, I don't think we'll use this option, but it gives us an option in the single player version of the game where you could hire an ally. You could say,
yeah,
I'm going to pay this much money or resource to hire a goblin to help me fight some enemies.
that is cool.
I think
Yeah,
if this feels good, if you can make it feel fun, this can be a really nice part of the gameplay loop. Like
yeah,
I'm
for sure.
struggling a bit on this dungeon. I'm going to hire a guy to help me, and he just kind of sits in the fight and does a bit of damage, and then we're through it, and I get the loot. Like I think that's cool.
Yeah.
And if you had some hirelings and they kind of showed up on the right, how you're showing there, I think it would make sense, and you'd know as a player what's going on. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's the guy I hired. He's doing 2 damage a round, which is nothing, but it's enough to get me through this fight."
Yeah, exactly. Just enough to be like, oh, that's a handy companion that you have or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, it could be if I 100% agree with that. I like that a lot. I think that that's the way that we should do it. If you wanted it to be visually represented or whatever, like it could be as much as like, something like you see that they have a hand of cards or whatever,
yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe you
yeah.
can
That would
click
work.
it and then you can see what they have in their hand at any time. Um, if we wanted to incorporate that, we might not even have
Yeah,
to do that because again, like if we
there's a bit of a trade-off there, right? If you let the player see their allies' decks,
Mhm,
you have to like they're always going to want to check. It like gives you information you can't say no to.
right.
There's a really interesting stuff. Have you played Balatro?
I haven't, but I've
You know what
watched
that
a
is?
little bit of it.
Okay, cool. Balatro has a really interesting design. It's like this summarizes the problem way better than I would without it. So it's the perfect
Mm,
example here. This picture's slightly too small for me to be okay with it. As is this one. This one's perfect. Um, okay, so the interesting thing about Balatro is you know what your jokers do. You know what each card scores. You know what basically you have all the information you need, okay, to work out what your score's going to be, to work out your score number. Can you see my mouse hovering around? Yeah, you
yeah.
can.
Yep.
So what it means is you're playing this game and you've got these jokers and you know what you need to score, and you go, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to play 5 jokers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go. Now, the game can tell you what you're about to score, and even worse than that, you as the player can work it out. You can pull up a calculator and you can go, right, Joker's worth 11. This Joker doubles it. Sorry, Jack is worth 11. This Joker doubles it. This Joker adds 12. You can do the math. You can work out what the blue
Right.
is, what the red, what the score is. You can work it all out. However, if you do that, the game becomes significantly less fun because what will
Yeah.
happen is the player will check what the 5 jacks does. Ah, that's okay. Remove a jack, put a king in. Oh, that's a little bit better. Remove another jack, put a queen in. Okay, that's okay. Let me put this jack back in. They will like try every hand before they commit. So this whole like, even though they could work it out of a calculator if they really wanted to, you intentionally obscure one level of information so that the player doesn't feel forced to like over optimize. And as a result, the main fun of the game is you're like, I think that's enough. You press go, you watch the number rack up, and then you go, yay, or you go, ah, no, I missed it by 20. Oh well. Um, Anyway, but what I was going to say is, I think the same is true for an ally's deck in our game, which is
Yeah.
that if you can see their deck, you're going to want to check it. You're going to want to see what they've drawn. You're going to want to see what they do. Ah, okay, he's doing a wound, which means I should do damage. Oh, he's applying brittle. I should do loads of damage. Oh, he's applying
Yeah.
poison. Okay, then I shouldn't do a bless because that removes the poison or whatever. And yeah, but if you don't show that information, the player doesn't get the choice, do I use it or not? They
Right.
don't the players who are most invested in winning don't spend tons of their time checking their allies' decks. Instead, your ally just says 5 damage, 6 poison,
Yeah.
whatever, and you're just sat there as the player, like, yeah, good,
Okay,
fine,
cool.
that's good.
Yeah, I like that. I think that yeah, I like that.
And I
Um,
think to a degree, the same is true for the enemy, right? You don't want to
right.
see their exact mechanics as they play out. You do want to see their cards because we think that's cool, but you
Yeah,
see them as they happen. It's like, ah,
exactly.
he's played that card. That's cool. That's a
And
big
now I
card.
I suffer the consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I that makes perfect sense to me. I like that. Um, because okay, so whether it's like, oh, we're all on the same side, something like this, or like you said, kind of like more traditional, like it might be, just flipped. Like, oh yeah, I see it's me and my friends, and we're all going up against, this one thing or whatever. We're in a party. You can see how much HP everyone has, and uh, that's kind of all you need is just they're gonna attack, and then uh, whatever.
Yeah.
Hmm. Because if this is so, if we decide like, okay, we don't need a lot of the stuff that we um talked about already of like we don't really want or have a need at any given point really for like a middle lane for anything. So like if we wanted to have it be more of like an immersive type thing instead of having it, something like this, there's always then the option of just for the sake of reusing things that we've thrown together real quick. Um
Yeah, I was gonna suggest this, I think, or suggest I think what you're about to suggest the same thing, which is that
where like, okay, it
it's
could be this. Like this is
yeah,
your battle UI. This is like what it looks like to be in battle, and then wherever player 2 went, like
yeah.
instead
So
of
I'm fully on board with this. Yeah,
okay. It either
and this is intended as a compliment, but yeah. So you ignore me if it doesn't land as one.
I
I think there's a certain strength here as well of like if the main part of our game is showcasing a hell of a lot of background
mhm,
and your main line of work is as a background artist, I think
right.
that's a smart move. Like, I think it'd
Yeah.
be crazy not to utilize that. Like, we could have one default background that just is for battles, or we could have it so,
And
every
I think
dungeon
that
has a background and enemies are displayed prominently on that background. I think that's cool. I think it's awesome.
yeah. So we can man, okay. So regardless of that, I do I did want to throw this out of okay, even in an example like this, and this doesn't really like again, I was talking to Morgan about like when I'm in this like super early planning and just thinking phase of like what can we do? Like what are any and all possibilities? I just kind of start drawing and putting things out there. Again, like getting out, trying to go for like quantity over quality in this stage where it's like I this doesn't look like anything I want it to look like, but it's just getting things kind of like piecing together ideas and trying to find where to start with anything. So I drew this before I had any of these like other elements, but was like starting to kind of like piece them together like as I was going. Like, oh man, now I gotta have the back of the cards. Let me go hop over and like work on that for a minute. Um, and then trying to when I sent it over to you last night and just being like, okay, here's a dump of what I'm thinking and so you can like kind of even vaguely decipher uh what you're looking at here. Because I very much don't expect anyone to be able to do that. But I think that if we go with like and this is not at all saying that we shouldn't do something like this. This is just regardless of if we wanted to go something more traditional or something along these lines, every time we would go into a dungeon, I fully intend that this map would be entirely unique to that location. Whether it's like just like basic set dressing. Again, think of like Snap does this, where they have different
Hearthstone.
stages. Arena does that too, where it's like, yeah, there is like a background, you might be in the desert this time and there's like, all you're seeing is sand, but then there might be like, some like cactus or
Hmm.
something, whatever. There's elements and like set dressing to reinforce like, hey, this is where you're at now. Um so that's like kind of just this. But then I had thought too of another variation of this is what if a variation on this kind of theme is let's turn our imagery tool on here just to make all of our lives a little bit easier. What if we went with like, and again, not saying we should do this, another solution or possibility is what if this is like a top down dungeon map kind of view with this general theming in mind of we want something kind of simple, kind of, whatever it may be, but we're looking at this from like an overhead perspective where what we're actually looking into when we go into battle is like a very kind of like old school RPG. Like we're looking at the dungeon as a top down perspective. So like, these are the dungeon, like what would be the ceiling. But it might be like some bricks or whatever. And these are like the actual walls of the dungeon. And then like if we wanted to get crazy with it, like, you could design like, oh, and now it's like, some kind of like labyrinth, like, you know, dungeon, whatever, and they in theory, this is like the dungeon that they're working through or fighting through. This looks terrible, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, it is like a top down kind of view
Yeah.
of this overall environment that they find themselves in. And then with something similar to what we had thrown out there could just be like a standard, like, again, it will not look anything like this, like a black rectangle with a white rectangle around it. It would be designed to fit within like the theming of the game. But we could do something where it is like a frame that we design, and then the floor of that mat has like a lowered transparency on it. So it's not overwhelming to look at necessarily. Like it's definitely like, pushing back what we're seeing to where like, okay, we might be seeing the inside of the dungeon or like this top down view of the dungeon, but almost barely. The card play and like the all of that action is the primary function and focus and what actually matters, but you're still kind of like getting a glimpse at it underneath
So,
whatever might be
so for
happening.
me, so for me, I think the best way to make this decision or decisions like this would be if we think what our end goal is, what our inspiration is,
Yeah,
what our
definitely.
like objectives are. And I think like the original pitch, and we've always come from the direction of like it's a dungeon crawling card game. And I
Yeah.
think this one, the one you're looking at now, I think
Mhm.
will make it feel like you're crawling through a dungeon.
I
I think it'll make
agree.
it feel like I have turned the corner. I am face to face with the enemy,
Yeah.
and I am fighting him. And I don't think you get that experience in many other games at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it draws on my yeah, like the world map we've decided is going to be like a series of dungeons, which are called crypts and dungeons and graveyards and temples and whatever.
Mhm.
You we didn't have to do that. Like you could have just chosen the enemy. You could have had enemies scattered on the map and you click the enemy. But
Yeah.
everyone is behind a dungeon and you've got to go through that dungeon. And when you're in those dungeons, you have to fight people. And as a result, I think this is the most natural progression of that is
I agree.
you're fighting someone and the cards in front of you are the representation of your character's fighting abilities. They have
Mhm.
weapons, they have spells, they have items, they have potions. I think it's cool. I think it will make it feel the most fun. Um,
Yeah.
and the most immersive. You say immersive. I don't think an alternative to this will ever feel more immersive.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree. Cool.
uh,
That's exciting then. So then a extension of this, I guess, is, we can do this a few different ways. And hmm so this is like, again, like one of those times where I run into these roadblocks of like, I think one application of this makes more sense if this is the path we want to go down for like solo play, versus I think it would look different for, okay, I think that should should we say, and correct me if I'm wrong or whatever, I cannot get out of my head just because of the games I've been like, I cannot stop playing Magic Arena right now, and
mhm.
uh that's where my head has lived for a few weeks now. And when I keep thinking of, in my mind, like PvP or like a co-op element of this or to this or whatever, I cannot help get out of my head just thinking it's like one-on-one PvP. And I know that we today talked about this earlier about like, well, no, that's a nightmare. That would be like a whole different thing of,
Yeah,
we're not really, that's not the direction we want for the time being. So I think a lot of the question, or like not questions, but like reservations that I have are entirely me defaulting back to that of like, well, what will this look like when you are fighting another opponent? But if that's not the game, which is 100% fine, um it uh then if we just say no, at this time we're not going to be, that's not the focus. We are not doing or working on anytime soon like a player versus player, you against someone else matchmaking.
yeah.
If we
I think
say
that's.
stop thinking about it like
I think
that, perfect. uh
yeah. I think that would be my ideal. To because
okay.
the problems that come with that are large on the like development side,
Yeah.
and then also the more we go into that hot like pit, the more we go into that route,
Hmm.
um, the more dangerous it gets because it means unless the game is wildly successful, PvP doesn't exist. You have 100 players buy your game and play it, and because none of them are online at the same time, no PvP match ever takes place. So
Right.
the game, like the
Yeah.
PvP element, dies on launch, even if it's quite successful.
Right.
Um, PvP games tend to be
I like
extremely
that.
successful or dead, and as a result, I'm like, and if anything, it's a benefit for me. Is like, I know like Snap is really really good, as is Hearthstone,
Hmm.
as is Magic, yeah, Arena. But I don't really want to play PvP. Like that's my preference. I would rather not. I'd rather play with
Yeah.
my friends or on my own and progress. I'd like to hop on my own and progress.
Yeah.
Ideally, when I'm like don't have the internet or don't have much mental energy to like try harder.
Yeah.
So I think the advantages for not having PvP are quite numerous.
Perfect.
Um,
That
I'd love to rule it out. That would be good in my book. Um, and never
and
say
I
never,
think
right?
that
We
even
could
if
ru-
that
we could
is
rule it out
like,
for the foreseeable.
yeah, even if that is like, no, this is how this game is co-op instead of like, you know, PvP. This is what this is about.
Yeah,
It's about, you
I,
know,
I actually have. I have another one of these I was meaning to talk about actually. So if we
yeah.
say so, we can probably write these down because sometimes I find it easier to say what a game isn't. Okay. So this
Yeah,
is not
exactly.
PvP, right? The
Perfect.
game is not PvP. The other one is not a roguelike. Okay. So
Yeah.
there are tons of slapping roguelike games and
Yeah.
really good roguelike card games. And the advantage of that is you jump on, you enjoy some content, then you fail out. And then the next time you play it, slightly different, but you're playing through the same content, which means the designers and the builders of those games don't have to build a ton of content because you just play through it over and over and over again. Me and my brother are playing through a good roguelike right now,
Mm.
and most of the card games me and you talked about have like they're either a roguelike or they got roguelike elements, and this is all super cool. I'm a big fan of that. But the reason this game isn't a roguelike for me is I do miss the like progress. I miss the fact that I can like go on, do my bits, come off, and I can do that for a week or two, and I'm getting further and further and
Right.
further. Snap has this, right? Snap has this thing where you go on every day and you get further and further and further. So it has a progression framework that is not a roguelike. Dying does not result in the end. It
Right.
doesn't reset over and over again. You build slowly over time, over many, many battles, over grinding and farming and so forth.
Yeah.
Um,
I I
yeah,
like
because
that. That is
we've there's a
incredibly
ton of
helpful.
roguelike card games.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think we need to compete in that space. It would be cool not to be a roguelike.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Uh so in this that already has helped solve so many issues cuz for the time, it's like, okay, well, what does player 2 look like or what does this enemy look like? And, it could be something like this where it's like, oh yeah, it's, uh you have your own player and your own like graveyard and whatever. But then again, like wanting initially being in the headspace of not wanting sorry, I'm missing don't know what I did. I see what I did. I accidentally grouped a layer that I did not in there. So okay, this answers a lot of questions. Go up here. It clear through. What did I do here? Layer one, group one. Hang on, let me let me sort this stuff. This is layer three. Go here. This I'm talking to myself. uh,
All right, so
so if I'm mumbling or whatever, it's because it doesn't matter. Trying to resolve some of these weird file structure issues that I've created for myself. Okay, so I'm gonna go for the time being. This is what it is, and we'll have a better solution figured out for this. Um, okay, so something like that, maybe. Now that immediately helps me with the resolving the question of now if this is kind of how we're thinking about it and this is how we want to see it, why would we see the enemy ever be like in a profile like portrait kind of way? It doesn't really make sense that we would see them that way. Again, my line of thinking initially it was
it's a
wanting it to be as
battlefield. Just
seamless.
type for space, stick him in his box.
Exactly. Like, okay, if you go up against another player, this is how it would make sense. And like wanting to keep that like fluidity between, you know, uh PvP versus PvE or whatever. Um, so
Hmm.
instead of like having a box be there, like, instead we would see like the enemy that we're fighting against. Um, so at any given time, we're not really, focused on oh, like, they have to look like this uh at any given time. You're just seeing like a enemy instead. Um of like, oh, I forgot that I did. Um I believe they added this. So, it could be something like okay, when you go in and fight, you find this enemy and they have like their name card above their head. Hey, this is the Goblin King. Maybe it is something like that. Like almost like
Yeah.
a health bar above your enemy's head or something like that. But you would say their name and then you would see, their HP and whatever it is that they do. So instead of being
Hmm.
like, oh, it's like a guy with like his cards or whatever, like no, you actually just see like the enemy there, and that's who you're fighting against. Whether it's,
Mm.
one versus like you just dungeon crawling and grinding, this might be what we're seeing. And then if you add in people to be co-op, now you have like, oh, your entire party, but this one boss has like more HP or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you have a set amount, but this guy has like 50 or 100 or whatever it might be. But we're actually seeing like a character in an environment. Um, and then you play against that. I think that's
I love
cool.
that. This would be dope as hell when if you're playing with other people, like even if
Yeah.
those allies are like hirelings or whatever, because it'll feel like you're a group of adventurers going
Like I,
through
I
a
feel like it
dungeon.
definitely
Killing
takes on like more of an RPG kind of
Yeah,
feel to it just by the nature of it. Um, man, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna
can you
save
send me
this.
this dungeon background?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll save it without the frame overlay thing that I sent yesterday, but I wanna
Mm.
save this guy. And then see, you still have a few minutes before you hop off.
Yeah. I got in theory I could stay for another hour, but
Okay.
yes.
I don't want to keep you too late. Um, but
Well,
that's
you've built it up
entirely up
now.
to you.
I'd love to hear your other game pitch.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I I did change that. Okay. Let me say
I should say before you pitch it.
yeah.
Doesn't matter how good it is. If it's the best idea I've ever heard, um, we want to release this first,
Oh,
even if it's a smaller
100%.
version of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. That was not like, oh, maybe we should
No,
like
no, no.
switch focus or whatever. No, I couldn't agree more. That
Yeah, I
to
think
me this is like the
unwise.
big like long-term kind of like, hey, this could be fun. As something. Okay.
Okay.
Let me save this lovely drawing for you. Um,
It's perfect. Flawless. No, yeah, no suggestions.
yeah. As is, send it send it out the door. Keeping it.
Yeah, ship it.
There we go. That. In our. Then I can take a shot of that other, like of this one if you want to, if it
Yeah,
helps or
sure.
if it
Yeah.
does anything.
No, it's handy.
And again, all of this can and will change probably a million times. So I very much assume that it will. Um, and hope that it does, because I'd be a little sad if this was the best that we came up with. I think we're onto
That's it.
something. It can
We've
only go
peaked.
up from here. Um, yeah, exactly. This is it. This is the best we could do. Um, cool. Let me share with this with you. How do we want to do this? Um,
Do you want a full screen pitch?
well, yeah. Let me try and do this. So I'm trying to think what scenes I have set up that is like if I do it this way, I don't see you. So let
Yeah,
me
because
let me
that's okay
add
though.
you.
I think we can live with. Ah, yeah.
Let me grab you. Uh,
Actually, there should probably be a version where it's your screen, both our cameras, and my screen, both our
I
cameras,
agree.
because
See, if I
we
was
both do
smart,
a
I
bit
would
of
do
like
that.
I'm
How
gonna
I set it
ramble
up
and I want to
is,
draw.
yeah, I set it up to be for some reason.
Just
Well, for
you.
the art streams, like, okay, here's a version with the chat box on screen, just so when we, send it to
Yeah.
YouTube or something, there's at least like some context for like me responding to chat or whatever. I have one set up for you where it is also just you and just your screen share, set as like a mirrored version. But I'm gonna add that. I'll add that tomorrow. Let me make a note of this. um, add scene. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Both a screen share for both of us with both cameras is also thing we would.
Yeah,
Um,
your scene can be called Dare Rant and Critter
yeah,
Rant.
yeah. It
We've gone
literally
a bit
just
mad.
is draw or dare. Are the two options I have. So you are. I wonder if I can duplicate copy this for the time being. Um, this. I think it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make sure that you were actually like showing up on stream and not just in OBS for some reason. Um, you in the other. I'll make this better for next time. For the time
Sure.
being, I think it works. And
I think it works.
also chat's not active, so we're turning this off for now. Cool. So, um, for chat or anyone that might be watching or maybe watching later, I had thrown out that I sometime last year um had been talking with another developer and had been like trying to mess with this concept of like I this was like the first thing that I was like I want to make a game, whether I have to do it myself or you know find someone to help me do this. I I have a idea, and how do I like formulate this idea onto paper and kind of set up a this call for this freelancer project that I was working on, and was like, "Can I pitch you this idea?" Um, so this is that. This is just a PDF. This is a really dumb question. How can I just view it as like a presentation or like as a
Uh,
slideshow
go
or
to the
just full
file.
screen even?
Yeah, go to the file and like open it with another program. Would be my
Oh, open it in
recommendation.
a different program.
You could do Chrome. That's okay.
Works.
There's probably a better option.
Let's do that. Where did my perfect? Grab that guy. Um, how do big like that? That's good enough. Okay,
And
so
then
all
yeah,
of this is entirely, again, like everything, very much a working title. And I had said this to you, Dare, that like I had thrown this together hours before this pitch, because I wasn't sure if he was even going to say yes, or if it would even be something that, again, when I originally set this up, that anyone would be into. And it's just kind of been living on a hard drive since then, um without a whole lot of thought. um oh wait, here we go, even better. We're learning how to make PowerPoint work.
oh
um
shit, what?
so okay, uh this was the working title that I came up with, again, moments before this pitch. Is just let the hunt begin. And the idea behind this is, um myself and my partner and like our whole family and friend group that plays games together, there we play a lot of just puzzle games in general. Whether it's like stuff like Phasmophobia, or there's a bunch that I list in here. And not even just like games like Phas or Demonologist or something like that, but like we do like a lot of those like escape room games that are just like all over
Yeah,
Steam. And wanting to make something kind of like that, but more cartoony, and more a way different play style, but like taking a lot of inspiration from what I liked about those, and wanting to like make something of like, well, here's the things I know that I really enjoy about those games, but here's what I think is missing, or like what I would like to see added to a version of this. Um
yeah,
so it's and a lot of this might not be the best way to describe it, but uh I think you'll get the kind of picture in a few slides here. But a 2.5D online co-op multiplayer, where you and three of your closest friends will come together to form the ultimate cryptid hunting team. Cryptid enthusiasts will select from various unique locations, each of which relates to a different cryptid. Players must hunt for clues and collect evidence to prove the existence of the map-related cryptid once and for all.
hmm
So again, games that I was like kind of inspired by, and taking a lot of uh inspiration from this genre of like, these games kind of all started popping up at the same time and became very popular, like Phasmophobia, Demonologist. There's this other very like indie one that we all fell in love with called like Labyrinthine. And Devour is another one, where they're all of those kind of like ghost hunting
yeah.
kind of games,
I
where it's
want.
like, okay, you
I don't
enter
know
a
what the
match.
genre is called, but in my head, I think of them as like janky horror co-op. because
Pretty
part
much,
like
yeah. Yeah, it's like, hey, you're on like some like ghost hunting crew, and like you go to a location, and you have your equipment, and your job is to kind of like find the clues and figure out what's going on, and then put a name to the face of like the creature that you're hunting.
mhm.
There's also that Bigfoot game that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
That's I know we were talking about this a
Mhm.
couple weekends ago, where like it has all of the components to be very fun, but then they add in so much stuff that it's like you ruined it. Like this is not very much like not enjoyable because of the things you tried to do
Yeah,
to make it
you said
different.
it's something like choose your weapons, and then it's like, "Ah, well, game over, you tried to kill Bigfoot."
Yeah,
No, it's like,
like
"Well,
it's
what?"
very very interesting. And wait, there's like parts that they added that are just like so like convoluted, or like way more difficult than they have any right being, for no real reason. Like it doesn't make it fun. Like it's not like, oh, it's like Elden Ring is difficult, and that's like a core feature or like part of this play style of these games. It's just like, what was the point of this?
Mm,
But so games with mechanics and like play loops kind of like that, but designed in something that I find more endearing, and like embracing this like 2D almost like puppeted animation kind of style.
yeah,
So I know I had thrown that one out there. The Wild at Heart, Call to the Lamb, Don't Starve, Night in the Woods. Very kind of like embracing this like 2D visual language. Um, but
yep,
also having like a lot of um like layered background elements that kind of like parallax in like that interesting way that makes it feel like you're a part of this environment you're walking through. Um so the hunters or the players would have to complete like a series of objectives in order to complete the hunt that they go on, and just some ideas of what that could look like or what that might look like. Collect photo or video evidence, so like maybe one of the items you can grab is like a camera or like a camcorder or a video camera. And like you see Bigfoot like walk through the woods, and like maybe it's like a quick time event or something like that, or like maybe you see a footprint on the ground or like scratch marks on a tree, and then you have to like photograph that evidence to like, oh yeah, that's going in our journal. I know that like the creature we're hunting has this kind of footprint, or like leaves this kind of mark behind. And then there could
mhm,
be something like collect animal remains or like human body parts, like, oh god, like this is like a you know alpha like predator that we're hunting or whatever, and we found like this human arm, and it's like, again, like all very cartoony. Like it's not like overly gory. It's like, again, like it's cartoony and just like cartoon violence type stuff, but like, oh, that like
yeah,
you know this creature uh tends to like feed on its prey or whatever, versus like uh oh, there's just evidence that it has kind of like roamed this area. um and then maybe there's like secondary objectives that uh aren't necessary in order to like complete the run or like the hunt, but it could be something like just additional stuff that is fun to collect, like little hidden like treasures and stuff. um so it could be like collect pages of lore for each one of these creatures. um so like, oh, I'm in the forest, I found this page from a journal hidden underneath a rock or something, and it has like lore about, it could either be like about that creature you're currently hunting, or it could be something completely unrelated that would be beneficial for like a future hunt, but it's like a trophy or like a
yeah,
kind of like a keepsake that you found, like, oh man, like now I know that I could be hunting for Mothman, and these are like some of the things I might have to look for. And then
mhm,
maybe there's like hidden trophies or like carved statues, just like again, little like stuff that's not um like a pertinent objective to solve any mission, but it could just be like fun collectible in game. Um
Yeah.
a list of possible cryptids, and here's just like some of like the big hitter like popular ones or whatever. Or it could be entirely like um you know branded to our universe of like
Yeah.
these are you know uh whatever creatures we want it to be, like, oh, it's like a some kind of like yeti or something like that, but
Mhm.
something specific to our game, like Bigfoot, Mothman, Chupacabra, Jersey Devil, Wendigo, and some kind of sea monster maybe. um and then you would have, so think like maybe like Left for Dead or something like that, where it's like you have a set roster of characters. Like maybe there's 4 or 5 or 6 different characters, and like depending on what character you pick, maybe they have like certain buffs or like certain advantages that like that playing as that character grants you. So like the park ranger might have, an added kind of like perception modifier in specific scenarios. Versus like,
Yeah.
oh, the armchair expert, like just the guy like me that just like sits at home like watching YouTube videos and like about like all these monsters. Something like an
Yeah.
FBI agent, a cryptozoologist, or just like a hiker. Um this is again, now we're all kind of just getting into like the visual style of what I mean by this like 2.5D.
Yep.
Somewhere I saw it referred to as like grid based movement. I don't know if that's right or not. So it could be wrong. But like this kind of like top down, like this game here, this is a screenshot from the Wild at Heart or whatever it's called. Yeah, the Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
Incredibly fun. It is like I'll send you some stuff on Twitter that I've saved from one of the developers where like seeing the how a scene like this is constructed is like absolutely wild to me, and I don't understand it. Um but maybe to you you're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. This is how this would have to be." To where
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
all flat 2D elements, but like when you walk past it, like, it has like this
Yeah. They pop
weird
up.
kind of like pseudo 3D uh
Yeah.
nature to it or whatever. um
Yeah.
a simpler version is something like Cult of the Lamb, or I forget what this one was called. Don't Starve is like another kind of example of
Yeah.
like this top down uh 2D style that I have in mind. um
Hmm.
Ideas for like, I like, it's called like Witchwood or something. It's this game. um Maybe the map looks something like this, where again you're seeing like kind of like an
Okay.
um per map that you go into, or per level, where it's like, okay, I'm hunting Bigfoot, I know I'm going to the forest. I'm hunting Mothman, I know I'm going to like, kind of like rural West Virginia or something like that. Whatever the thing might be that you would,
Yeah.
I think it would be a cool feature to be able to open up like a an overworld map, but that's like blacked out or like has fog covering it, and like the map uncovers itself the more that you navigate and move around the environment. um
Cool.
and then
Yeah.
like, maybe you could set like markers of like, oh hey, here's where I saw this piece of evidence, or like maybe again, like with it being like a co-op thing and whatever, maybe it's a shared map, so that like, oh hey, I uncovered this bit of evidence and here it is, and then everyone can see on their map like, oh, now I know, like, okay, if I want to get to you, I have to move in that general direction if I want to see that also, or see what that looks like. And then again, this is all from the Wild at Heart. I was playing it at the time and was like, man, this is so beautiful, and like the walk cycles are like so simple. Like all of the character animation is done like so well, but in like a very simple way. But it's so charming and like uh if again, if you haven't played it or watched any like videos of it or anything, even just the trailer, uh it's very visually pleasing. Um and that was all I had of like again, the core things that it I think are interesting is I don't know of anything like this. Like that takes from these kind of like this genre of game of like we're monster hunting, we're solving mysteries, we're piecing together evidence, and then like, you might have to have like, oh, you have to find 5 pieces of evidence before you know, oh, that's obviously Bigfoot, and then the problem solved, and on to the next adventure or whatever. Um, it looks
So
like this kind of visual language.
yeah, so I think it's also I think it's completely I completely see it coming from the games you like to play with your like closest friends and family, with leaning towards the art style that you prefer, and is also, of course, just happens to be within like your wheelhouse of like possibilities. Like
Yeah,
uh, AAA full 3D graphics, most high
yeah,
fidelity ever co-op horror game. Like, yeah, that does sound cool, but
sure,
there's no point us talking about it. Like it's not. That's,
yeah,
yeah, like yeah, hand us a few $1 million and we'll see what we can do.
right,
Otherwise, it's not. Yeah, so I completely see it. So f- f- I'm actually in a good position for the discussion around this because I don't play the co-op horror games. I have
yeah,
seen video of them. I think I've played some of them, but it's generally not my thing, right?
yeah.
So I don't really have a group of people I would play them with, and they're meant to be played co-op.
Oh, absolutely,
So
yeah.
some of these questions might be stupid. Um,
No, not at
so
all.
my first thoughts is like in the games that you're saying it's similar to. I assume that a lot of the core mechanics, core gameplay revolves around like this creeping danger that like at any point bad stuff's going to happen. Is that true? Is there like a suspense? Are you
There
lingering in
definitely is.
suspense?
Yeah, there's each one's, a little bit different. So in like Labyrinthine or whatever, there's like an actual, again, depending on which map you're in, which thing you're playing through, um there can be like uh an enemy roaming the map, and like each one has like a different set of rules of like, oh, this one it can only see movement, so like if I just stop moving whenever I encounter that monster, it won't see me, but if I don't see it and like keep moving past it, it's immediately going to start chasing me. um
Cool. Yeah,
so that could
this is
be
kind of how I'm. This
part
is
of
how I'm
it.
familiar with them. So that's helpful. So
Yeah.
the next question I have is in the example. So I guess the most obvious question here is the same true for how you pictured this game, that like the cryptids each pose like a unique threat to you
I
that
think
you can
so.
somewhat avoid, and that's the suspense. That's the like
Yes.
time pressure. Is
Yeah.
like we need to prove the cryptid before he does bad stuff to us,
Exactly.
whatever
I
that is.
I when I had pitched it,
Cool.
that was like again like very much the first time that I was like, I don't know, even from like an indie standpoint or any kind of standpoint, like I don't know what's attainable from like a mechanical perspective. Like I have these ideas where I think it would be cool, but I don't know what that looks like or how
Yeah.
labor intensive or whatever that might be. I do think, and again, like I this isn't like a fully fleshed out thing by any sense of the imagination, but I think it would be cool if it had like a hunt cycle or whatever. Like there has to be some kind of, pressure there of like, okay, if you just walk
Yeah,
around and like do whatever, then how's that really
yeah,
fun? But
yeah.
if it
It's not a chill out and explore the map game. It's kind of what my first
yeah,
question was. It's like this isn't a game where it's like, yeah, let's find out, and you just take as long as you want, and you don't
yeah.
even pause the game. You just go to the toilet. You're like, yeah, whatever, guys. Like,
Right,
I'll be back in 5
exactly.
minutes.
How is
It's not that
that
kind of
fun?
game. I just, yeah, I
Yeah.
thought I'd check that. And
It
the other
yeah,
question I have is on
if
the
it can be
opposite end of the scale.
like randomized things where like, okay, that this creature becomes active after, so much time. Like maybe it's not like immediately hunting you, but it could be like, okay, after you could either have it like set by triggers of like, oh, you found the first piece of evidence, now it starts hunting you. Or,
Yeah.
it could be like a
So, so,
time-based thing, like, oh, after 2 minutes in the match, then it starts, or whatever it is. Um,
so my next question is in your game, it doesn't have to be true. There is no combat, and like there might be preventative measures that you can take
right.
by like hiding or doing a thing to distract or dissuade the enemy,
Yeah.
but there's no like, great, I've got the shotgun, guys, bam, we win.
I think it could go either way. Like,
Okay.
I think that at the time, and still maybe a little bit to this point, like, I don't really want it to be like, and this is why, like, this temporary title of like, "Let the hunt begin," like, it doesn't really maybe it's like precisely capture the essence of what it is. Again, this title was literally like 10 minutes before I gave this pitch, like, I got to call it something, here's words to put on paper.
Mm,
Um but I think that I I don't know that I want it to be that like you're hunting these animals. Like I think that it's more of like an investigation or whatever. Like you're trying to solve this mystery of like, oh man, maybe you get like a prompt or something at the beginning like, oh hey, local teens have gone missing, and you have to kind of, you're on the crew to like find out like what is at the cause of this or whatever. And then you're just hunting for the evidence. I know that I had a part where I think it would be cool where, again, maybe you can't fight back, but like you said, there could be, little modifiers or like things like, oh, I used the bear repellent and now, Bigfoot won't be able to track my scent or whatever it is. um
mhm.
maybe there's something like that, but I think it would be cool if they could like, if they're hunting you, because again then
Yeah,
there's that pressure, you have like this thing like, oh my god, like if it takes all of us out, we failed, we have to start over or try again or whatever. But I do think it would be cool if it goes in phases of like, okay, you see him and he like is hunting you. I don't want it to be like an insta kill kind of thing. I think it would be like, it would be more fun if, okay, Bigfoot swipes you and hits you. Now you're downed and you have like X amount of time to be picked up by your team before you're like dead that round. Um, then it adds like kind of a secondary objective for your teammates of like, oh shit, like so like Derek gets knocked down and we need to pick him up or revive him before he's just like out of this round. Um and again, like not that it would be like anything crazy, it would just be like, oh, they have to go over and like click and hold your character to like apply the bandage or whatever. Um in order to like get you up kind of thing. Um
yeah.
Again,
I
that's a option of how it could work, but yeah.
how this is really last one is just more last one. Never say last one. This one's more practical, which is like, yeah, you said the design is similar to these four. If you had to do the art for it, you said that like you're not like primarily speaking, you're not an animator.
Hmm.
Do you think the animation level required is quite
I
nicely
I think
aligned
I
to where your levels are?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Where again, like
'Cause it
it's
it can be it can be cutesy, right? Where they
yeah,
almost bounce along
that's
and then
exactly it. Where like any of the, I mean, this one I think maybe is like a little bit more intense, and I don't really remember. Like it's been a while since I've played Cult of the Lamb to like be able to just reference it from memory or whatever. But like this one for sure, the Wild at Heart, like you see their legs moving and stuff, but exactly like you said, it is very bouncy. It's very simple animation where like with the world and like how everything else looks, like it doesn't feel weird or whatever, but like it's like wow, that's cute, like um you and yeah, I definitely feel confident that like again, like it's not going to be something again like as I do not consider myself an animator, but I know that it's like okay, if I sit down and take some time to figure out what these walk cycles look like or whatever, I can just kind of I know that I would be able to get to some kind of level of finish that it's like okay, well this works, or like this works for what we want it to be. Um that I'd be happy with.
cool. Okay. Yeah, and then my only other question was gonna be, out of the 4 games that this was inspired by and any others, as someone who doesn't play them ever, I'd be interested to know, like, your peak recommendation, like,
Man.
um, w
That
no,
is
no, like, this is the best representation of this genre. If before building this game, you could play one of these, this is the one you should play. Because um I've played Cult of the Lamb, I've played, Don't Starve, and I've played Night in the Woods. I haven't played any of the top 4 games. I've seen a lot of
yeah.
Phasmophobia,
Yeah. I feel like
and a
that is
little
like the
bit
most
of
popular one.
Noise, but
Um
yeah, but I've not played them. Um,
the
yeah.
thing is that I like I like something different about each of them that I'm like, well, this one is where
Of
I'm
course.
getting like inspiration from. I think that for man, maybe in terms of like the core loop and like play mechanics, probably one at the bottom two of either Labyrinthine or Devour, where
Okay.
again like these four kind of fall into this like very cheap like jump scare kind of thing, like that's
Mm.
like the big thing. And like I'm not crazy about that personally, like I love horror stuff, like it is some of my favorite uh like one of my favorite genres for anything is horror. So whatever, I don't want this to necessarily be like a horror thing, like I think it can be like this. So like thematically or whatever, I think it's most in line of like Cult of the Lamb, where like it's cartoony, it is like very stylized, but it's like oh, it might be like darker or like scary kind of themes, if you like think about it or whatever. Um again, like not inherently like oh, this is a horror game or anything, but it's like oh, it's cute and it's cutesy and it's fun, but also it's like oh man, you can like eat people, or you can like fight these monsters or whatever it might be. But I think that Cult of the Lamb, again, from like a thematic standpoint, is the games that I would like put it like in that category, but like an entirely different play style to where it more aligns with either like
Yeah.
Labyrinthine or Devour, just in terms of like the core play structures that you see in those types of games. Um, this one here,
So
I absolutely can't recommend it enough. Again, it was a really small team that made it. And like it's some of the best like kind of like environmental like puzzle things, but like I don't know, it's very cool. It starts off very simple and like uh whatever, and just like as they added chapters to it, it just got better and better each time. And then I think that of these three kind of fit into more of like one umbrella, where this one is the outlier a little bit of the genre of these four. Um, but I think of these three, I think that the one I am inspired by the most in terms of playability would definitely be Devour. Just because it's like,
Okay.
oh, you have these like objectives that you have to hit and like complete, and like these like little puzzles you have to solve while this monster's also hunting you, and like it kind of like rolls out in phases of like, oh, it we might start hearing things like in phase one, like, to give us like some kind of clues or whatever, but then like, the closer you get to your goal, the more aggressive this enemy becomes.
Yeah. I'd be very interested in bringing this to life. Like I definitely would. I think slots in really nicely here actually. So if we just think practically and long term, well, my hope is that long term is like a game every few months rather than years. But let's just say long term,
Sure.
easier. Is that the card game has the lowest barrier to entry. In theory, we
Yeah.
could be like weeks away from releasing it if we had to be, right? We could really shrink the scope, like no fucking co-op, no
Yeah.
fucking X, Y, Z. Like we said it wasn't a roguelike, it's a fucking roguelike because we haven't got enough content to make anything else. We could shrink it right down and release it. And I think that makes a good first game. It's because means we can decide when we need to ship and ship.
Yeah.
Um, Great, perfect. Then you got this game, which I think makes a great number two. There's more animation to it. It's a non-existing genre in a lot of ways. Like there is, like you say, there is no 2.5D horror co-op games.
Right.
And I think it would be nice. I'd like the idea that building this co-op, we're building this card game to my vision. Then we're building this co-op horror game to your vision. I think that'd be cool. Um, and the other way it slots in spookily nicely is in the past, let's say, month, I've had an idea for a game, which I think what I was really struggling with was, and I won't give you the full outline because I wouldn't want to detract from this or the game we're on right
Oh,
now,
I
but
mean,
just
by all means,
for later.
I'm all for it.
But the bit I was most struggling with is that it doesn't have combat, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
have like the in my head the reason it's fun is because of the inherent pressure that the environment puts on you.
Yeah.
Um, and I was trying to wrangle in my head. I was like, I don't know why that would be fun, but I get the feeling it would be. And I think if we were to build this game and I was to play a little bit of Labyrinthine, Devour, like with like get used to that genre, I think it could really inform me as to
Right.
how this game could be fun. It's like my idea was that it's multiplayer co-op and that there is no bad guys as such. There is no like it's just like the suspense is there from the environment.
Mhm.
Um and it sounds like that's a heavy overlap with this genre of games.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so I think this could be a quite a cool step to go card game, this thing. I'm sorry to call it this thing, but card game,
I mean,
co
that makes sense to me.
co co-op horror. And then the the other thing I guess is more co-op exploration. It's more what
Yeah,
my
I
thoughts were.
I mean, that sounds already cool to me also. Uh, like just a
So yeah,
co-op exploration thing.
I like the scope of this game, the one that you've pitched. I think the scope is very reasonable. Um, Often I find that game pitches like the implication is that it's fun because the scope is massive.
Sure.
Um, in fact, like this card game's a little bit like that. Is like you can kind of pitch it up and it sounds okay, and then it's like, but actually it's fun because there's hundreds of cards and loads of dungeons and loads of enemies. It's like, okay, sure, that might be fun. If the game's fun, it's nice that there's more of it.
Yeah.
Um, whereas the I feel like the idea you've pitched is like it could be fun with 4 maps, 4
Yeah,
cryptids, like
exactly.
4 characters, like just a very tight package of like, this is the game. You're going to play it with your friends for 4 hours and then you'll be done. You will
Yeah.
have done the whole game and that's the game. And yes, we could elongate it and expand it, but it doesn't require more content to be fun.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely, like, I mean, there's so many games, again, that we play, whether it's in this or just those, like, escape room games that you can get, like, for, like, $1 or something on Steam, where, like, just this idea of, again, this is definitely scaled back to be like, hey, this is intended to be something. Hey, do you want to hop in a match and, like, hop in a lobby and play a few rounds together? Okay, cool. Hey, it was great hanging out, but I got life. I got other things I need to jump into now. Something that isn't going to be like, oh man, this is going to take like hours to solve just this one dungeon or this one map location. Uh, which also, that, that can be fun. There's a time and place for it for sure, but um, just, yeah, this is definitely meant to be like kind of more casual, but also, again, like, I as a fan of this genre and like this kind of these like two like polarizing things of like, I don't know, I think that there could be a very big interest in something like this, because I don't know of anything that is doing anything like it, like quite like this in this way, other than, all the other games that are like done in Unreal, and, these like all using the same 3D character models and whatever. um which, again, is nothing wrong with it. I'm not trying to dunk on those games. I think it absolutely works, and whatever, but this is different, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I'd love to. Yeah, I think you could. Our game, like this card game at the moment, I still feel like it's a little bit away from being able to tell how fun it is. And
Hmm.
but I think with this game, you'd be able to tell if it was fun in like a few days of work, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Probably.
again, all of this to say, like, I cannot agree more with you that, like, this is on the shelf. Like, I'm not even thinking about it. Like, haven't been thinking about it. It was just like, man, I still think that that would be cool. Like, I think there's something to this idea worth revisiting whenever the time comes, unless something
Mm.
drops tomorrow that's like, and here it is, and it's like, fuck, we missed it. Like, we missed our window. Um, because it's
Yeah,
not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And I have I know we've talked about this, and I've said this on like solo streams a lot this past week, but uh it is nice that we're both kind of on the same page for most things, it seems, and we're just like, cool, this is what we're
yeah,
working on. We're going 110%. Like, how do we make this the best thing, and then what also is the next thing? Because
yeah, yeah,
that sounds like perfectly ideal to me. Is just to have, okay, what's the next one, what's the next one, and just make cool stuff together, and uh see what can come out of it.
yeah. I agree. I think that is cool. Um, I think on that note, I might, I might call it a day. I
Yeah,
might.
I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Thank you for everyone that came and watched. If you're watching this later on YouTube or somewhere
Thanks.
else, thank you. We definitely appreciate it. We appreciate you guys being here and hanging out. Um, and yeah, I'll most likely be here tomorrow. I don't know why I wouldn't be or why I won't be streaming, but um yeah, we'll pick things up kind of where we left off with our solo art streams and be working on more cool game assets and game art. Um yeah, is there anything you want to say to send us out this week?
No, thanks for tuning in, watching. You know where to find us. Follow us. If you have questions or suggestions, definitely send them our way.
Yeah,
We
please
we love to hear it and love to see it. Yeah.
drop those in there one last time if anyone's hanging out or seeing it later. That's our Discord and all of our social media where you can find us anywhere and everywhere. But all right, cool. I will wrap things up here and talk to you guys later.